Hey everyone, this is your host Omar, and I would like to welcome you to this symposium where we're celebrating the second season of the Gumpcast and this podcast about what keeps us going during tough times, making it to its third year. And we are starting a live version of this in San Francisco. So season 3 is going to be full of surprises, but so is tonight. I am so honored to be facilitating this collection of humans and their spirits and bringing together a really fun and dynamic and eclectic group of talks. Some of them are going to be pre-recorded and some of them are going to be live from here. And we have the main event being about the Middle East, where we're going to be diving into the topic of Israel and Palestine and what's going on right now. But we're also going to be talking about tough times and visiting many areas in the world that may not necessarily be top of mind before that, all through vulnerability and individual human experiences, as we always do on the Gumpcast. And everyone that you're going to see today already has an episode on season 2. So this is a collection of people, and they're mostly really friends and people who have impacted me as an individual. And I am excited to walk you through tonight. It's going to be 3 hours. We're going to start off with, there's going to be a mix of music and talks. We're going to start with a song that I think really captures the essence of today's event. And after that, we're going to move to our first speaker, Ryan Ginn, who's going to talk to us about self-compassion and guide us through a meditation that's going to get us started with the programming. So enjoy this song, and we're going to transition directly to Ryan Ginn. And I'll see you again in a bit.
This joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Oh, this joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Don't you know that? This joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Oh, I said the world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. Oh, this strength that I have, this strength that I have, this strength that I have. Oh, yeah, now. The world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it to me. This strength that I have. Oh, yeah. The world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it to me. This strength that I have. Oh, yeah. The world didn't give it to me. Oh, I said the world didn't give it. The world can't take it away. Oh, this love that I have. This love that I have. Oh, yeah, now. The world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it to me. This love that I have. Oh, yeah. The world didn't give it to me. Don't you know that? This love that I have, yeah. The world didn't give it to me. Singing, the world didn't give it. The world can't take it away. This pride that I have, this pride that I have. This pride that I have. Oh, yeah, now. The world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it to me. This pride that I have. I said the world didn't give it to me. Don't you know that? This pride that I have, yeah. The world didn't give it to me. Oh, I said the world didn't give it. The world can't take it away. All this peace that I have, oh, yeah. The world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give me my peace that I have. Oh, yeah, now. The world didn't give it to me. Won't you sing about peace? This peace that I have. Oh, yeah, now. The world didn't give it to me. I said the world didn't give it. The world can't take it away. All this joy that I have, this joy that I have. This joy that I have. Oh, yeah, now, the world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it to me. This joy that I have. I said the world didn't give it to me. Don't you know that? This joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. take it away.
The world didn't give it and the world can't take it away.
The world didn't give it, the world can't take it
The
away.
world didn't give it and the world can't take it away.
The world didn't give it, the world can't take it
The world
away.
didn't give it and the world can't take it away.
The world didn't give it, the world can't take it away.
Resistance Revival Chorus believes in the words written by the poet Toy Derricott when she wrote, "Joy is an act of resistance." We believe in the words of Mr. Harry Belafonte, who said, "When the movement is strong, the music is strong." We sing to revive the hearts of those who fight for social justice, and we sing together for freedom.
It does that to help this other part of me, like kind of a younger part that, or definitely a younger part that feels, let's see, even if I just tap into it in the moment, feels shaky in this world, you know, feels like it needs some soothing. You know, it's hard. It's just hard to be me. It's hard to be whatever, sometimes sensitive or just, it's hard to deal with just life. Right. So I don't go to alcohol generally, you know, like I go to food, and this part of me like is the provider of that, of those, you know, food experiences. And so just to maybe paint a bit fuller of a map, then there's also this protector when in relationship with my wife that's like, that steps in and says like, back off. Don't take this away from me. I need this. And doesn't have obviously much like collaborative skills because it sees it as so very almost like survival or something, just like this is non-negotiable. So as I map that all out, and if I were to share that all with my wife, she would have a lot more compassion for why I'm being so inflexible. And I would too. I'd be like, yeah, so I get it. I can see how you want food prepared in a different way. And this is what I'm working with. There's these parts of me. And then maybe we together could look at, well, it sounds like there's a deeper part of you that feels a bit undernourished. Is there some other way we could nourish that part of you besides food right now? Do you want to have a cuddle on the couch? Mm-hmm. Oh, that actually might be really nice and actually more effective. And then I get to, because that wasn't just to dip in a little bit to my personal history, like that wasn't an option. That wasn't in my like menu, so to speak, right? As a kid, like when I was feeling undernourished or a bit like shaky or having a hard time, it wasn't like, oh, let's go cuddle. Let's like, you know, touch, or sort of that kind of holding wasn't an option. So I almost don't expect it. I just think that's not really in the cards.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Ginn. I'm a IFS therapist up here in Oregon and also a coach. And tonight I want to introduce a concept of self-compassion, mainly through the ends of IFS. It's also kind of thought of as parts work, right? So just to start out, what is IFS? It's a process by which we get to know the different aspects of ourselves through meeting them with compassion, curiosity, care, and a general sense that it's to our benefit to get to know and integrate all aspects of ourselves. Now I'd like to shift gears and offer just a really brief meditation, mindfulness exercise for you all, just so you can actually have more of an experience of what self-compassion looks like through the IFS lens. So I invite you to just get yourself situated so that you can bring your attention inwards, just taking a moment to find some comfort as best you can, and begin to just direct your attention towards your body, towards whatever sensations are more at the forefront. And bring an intention of allowance, right? Every sensation and thought, sound can arise, and there's really nothing that you need to do with any of them right now. And what I want to invite now is the beginning of a survey of what parts of you are present. And to help you out with that, I'm just going to offer some kind of possibilities just so you can kind of get a sense of what I'm talking about. Like maybe there's a part of you that is trying to kind of do this meditation right. It's trying to figure this out. Am I having the right kind of experience? Is there anything I need to do differently to have the right kind of experience? It's a common part of ourselves. You can just notice that might be a part of you that's present here. There also might be a part of you that's, after the end of a long day is still holding some, to-dos that, have been done. Is the laundry need to be put in the dryers? What am I going to do for dinner? Or whatever sort of logistical to-dos that are still kind of hovering in yourself. You can notice that part, kind of the manager of your life part. Just give a nod and see even where that and how that part of you lives in you. You might also see if you can't find an intellectual part, a part that's come here to learn something, to figure something out, to maybe even share some of your own thoughts and ideas. It's kind of mental, intellectual part.
Hey guys, it seems like we are experiencing some difficulties. But luckily we have Ryan in the studio. Ryan, do you want to continue doing the meditation live? So it seems it's going to be easier.
Thank you. I'll just pick up where that left off.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So you've gotten a sense of some of the parts that might be present, and take a moment now just to see if there's anybody else, right? Any other part of you. Maybe it's actually just a sensation or a clenching somewhere in your body, so the part that's even hard to name. Just a moment to continue the survey on your own. Reminder here that this survey, right, is done with a gentleness and a curiosity, where none of these parts have to change in any way. None of them are doing anything wrong, just doing their thing. Beginning to shift into just a simple practice of emanating acceptance, allowance, and even acknowledgement and appreciation of these different parts that are trying to take care of you, trying to protect you, or maybe have a story they at some point want to share with you. And as you start to really register the complexity of your inner world, see if you can't actually recognize that this is a complexity that lives in all people. Inside of all people, there is this tension of multiple different parts that are oftentimes at odds, wanting to go in different directions. Just registering that all people are trying to live and navigate their own complexity, their own inner tension. And as you do that, start to shift your compassion towards all those out there, all the many people. Maybe even particularly people that you might have a hard time feeling compassion for. Just taking a moment to really recognize that nobody is unidimensional. Everybody is multidimensional. And everybody is actually yearning and wanting to feel acceptance, acknowledgement for their effort to just be navigating this world, this world at times. As we start to wind down this meditation, you can kind of come back into yourself, and if you feel inclined, you can place a bookmark somewhere that was of interest to you, someplace you might want to return to in a conversation with another, or just in your journaling, or however you want to explore something more deeply. And now I invite you to just open your eyes and come back into the space, and we'll transition it back to Omar.
Thanks for saving us there.
Sure, it's nice here.
How was that for you?
Giving the meditation?
Yeah, especially after
Oh.
you had to follow yourself midway. So
Yeah, I know, it's weird. Yeah.
Very skillful.
Oh well, I do my best. Yeah, it's somewhat cringy to hear myself.
Yes.
Talk, oh, so many ums and so many. So I have to definitely practice some self-compassion in that situation.
Yes, it's point in case. Thank you so much for being here and for just supporting me throughout this journey. And if anyone wants a live demo, we We did this with our friend Paul Kist on our episode number 7 in season 1. So just thank you so much for being here, Ryan, and thanks for everything you've given us. If you can hang out with us for a little bit more, we'll get through some of the next talks, and then we'll see if we can get all together and have a discussion before Stacey Haynes comes on.
Yeah, I hope to. I've got a little girl that might, kind of want to pull me out of
Yes. That's totally understandable too.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Ryan.
You're welcome.
All right. So our next guest is also with us live, but this is a recorded video. She's a really good friend of mine and is really a self-made entrepreneur who has built a multi-million-dollar company. And this is her story in how she started doing that despite a lot of the prejudice that is naturally in the way of a young Asian woman trying to make it in America. So without further ado, here's Angela Quach, CEO of the Destiny Lab. And she's also with us backstage, so you'll be able to hear from her. Hopefully, she won't have to repeat what she's already done. So let's see if it works this time.
My dearest friend and fellow healer Omar has asked me to speak with you all tonight on my personal story and relationship with oppression. Oppression is not merely an act of subjugation. It is a systemic structure that restricts individuals and groups from exercising their rights and living their lives to the fullest. It robs individuals of their potential, their peace, and tragically, their lives. Okay, so today I am very proud to be an Asian American female CEO. But growing up in Columbus, Ohio, not so much the case. To be judged, silently and not so silently, based on factors that are out of my control, my gender, my race, my social class. It was confusing and heartbreaking as a little girl. People still suffer from systemic oppression. This is the way the world is, but it is not the way it should be. So imagine watching a precious, wide-eyed, open-hearted, brilliantly curious little girl and knowing she will be looked down upon because she's not considered as good or as important or even as brave as a boy. She will be teased because she doesn't look the same as others in her immediate environment. And she will be bullied, or sometimes even worse, pitied because she is financially poor. This is the world she has to enter, and it is unacceptable. To have that much doubt, shame, and uncertainty clouding a child's ability to be the best contributing member to society that he or she can be is tragic, to say the least. And it makes me want to scream in a white rage at the injustice. So growing up, I didn't have resources, nor did I have advantageous prejudices on my side. So how did I do it? How did I fight systemic oppression? How did I overcome so many prejudices that could have held me in social victimization, could have held me in poverty? Well, I could go on and on about access to education, seizing opportunity, affirmative action programs, but here's what I really want to share. Going back to that precious little girl, she learned very early on that it hurts to love a world that will not always love her back. But it hurts even more to not love that world that will not always love her back. If these are her only options, which path do you think that brave little girl wanted to walk? I honor everyone here who strives to understand. Showing up here, getting educated, doing something about it, it's not easy to have compassion when I am so sure that I was wronged. But I know it is the only way to still have hope, that the world will one day truly love us all back. And the world is changing, but we need full-on innovation. Only a radical love can save us now. And to my fellow brothers and sisters whose hearts have also been forged by fire as well, I see you. Know that you are chosen. You are the human for this job. more kindness, more understanding, more compassion, more love, more faith, more vision, more rights for everyone. I fight, we fight until everyone is safe and seen. I pray for peace. Kindness is not a weakness. It has the power to change hearts, minds, and action. And I'm not saying to let oppressors walk all over you, but how can we find and get to a space where we can forgive and focus on a vision that honors equality and coexistence? Thank you for listening to my story, and to my dearest friend, Omar Shaker, for having me.
These ideas that are invented by humans continue to have, and have for a long time, had violent impact on people's lives. And dealing with them doesn't mean pointing out the ways in which they're made up and expecting people to forget it, but pointing out the ways in which they're made up, and then also recognizing the way that they yet still have deep-seated impacts on our ability to be kind to each other and to give everyone the dignified experience and existence that they live, which they're not getting. Yeah, right? Everyone should have a dignified life. Most people aren't guaranteed that, and that's wrong. And there are all sorts of reasons why that happens. And the demons that we carry because of past trauma, because of fear, because of a scarcity mindset, because of oppression, such as racism or gender injustice or ableism or whatever it is that you want to call it, whatever your views are on economic distribution, you got to deal with those demons. You know, you don't deal with them by saying they don't matter. So like my relationship with blackness is my relationship with blackness. And I can ignore it, I can pretend, or I can just excavate it and see like, how can it adorn my existence in a way that sometimes is heavy, sometimes is light, but that I'm not afraid of.
Yo,
Hey,
Hatem.
how's it going?
Good to have you here.
Good to be here.
It's thanks for flying all the way from South Africa just to be on the podcast.
Absolutely. I would say I'd do it any time, but that would be a lie.
I would not believe you. I've known you for too long. But it's such a special day to have you here. And so you're here touring for the African Leadership Academy, which you are now the CEO of.
That's right.
When we recorded our episode, you were the dean.
That's right.
Trying to just transition into maybe different things. And now you are running the school, and you're here to promote
The organization and the work.
Yeah. So we'll get a chance to talk about that. But it's so special to have you here. I have an old friend, and just I feel immediately calm to be with you on the screen and not be talking to people on my own.
Yeah.
When we recorded this episode, this was one of the first few episodes of season 2. And today we're done with season 2.
Congratulations.
So, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for including me.
Yes, absolutely. And today, as you know, we're going to be talking about the Middle East. We're going to be going into some really tough conversations. It seems like a particularly tough time. And I just want to start by addressing this fact that when we talk about the Middle East, we're usually talking about Palestine and Israel and that conflict specifically, which seems to be very relevant to the Western world. But I'm curious to know what you feel about Sudan right now, being Sudanese. Sudan is arguably, objectively, having a much tougher time, a bigger catastrophe in many ways. But no one seems to be giving it that much attention, at least. So I wanted to first ask you, what are your feelings around that? And to just start off by talking a little bit about Sudan, to spread awareness.
Off. I mean, I think I have a few thoughts that come to mind that aren't necessarily in agreement with each other when thinking about this topic. On the one hand, I think it's important to acknowledge that the conversation this time around, right, this isn't the first time that there's conflict of this nature in that part of the world or our part of the world, isn't the first time that there's suffering and loss. Maybe it's different in scale, but certainly isn't the first time. And it feels, at least watching the conversation in the West, that there's more attention. And I'm talking specifically about Israel and Palestine right now. There's more attention. There's more, I think, openness to examining the facts differently. And I think I mentioned to you in an earlier conversation, I'm Sudanese, but I live in South Africa, and I have a degree of pride, I think, to be living in a country which emerged from one of the world's most sinister, recent, oppressive systems, did so arguably peacefully, and in coming out of that turmoil and that trauma, articulated some values about human dignity that it wanted to live up to. And in the last few months has demonstrated a way that you can make that kind of argument. All of that, I think, is mixed in my mind with exactly what you mentioned, which is Sudan has been in a state of stagnation and then decline for 30 years. In 2019, we had a revolution, and there was a peace agreement that was supposed to negotiate a peaceful transition to civilian rule, which was interrupted. And so this happened in 2019. It was interrupted a couple of times, and then last year in April descended into civil war, a civil war that probably anyone could have predicted, because you had two armies. It's not going to end well, right? One set group of people with guns is bad enough, but if you formally permit two groups of people to walk around with guns and all sorts of other munitions for ages, obviously one group isn't going to be willing to let them go. And today, when it happened in April, it was on the headlines, it was in the headlines, front page news for a few days. But most of us, I think, will not have seen any mention of what's happening in Sudan in the last few months. And the numbers are staggering, right? There's, at least 15,000 people dead, more than 30,000 people injured. And then this is the one that really hits home. I think there's almost 9 million people displaced, whether internally or refugees. And it's not about who's suffering more, but there is a gap. There's something that gives me pause, right? To ask what gets attention, why it gets attention, and why. Those are some of the things I'm feeling.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a sense of maybe a mix of anger and helplessness and some spectrum of wanting to do something. And
sure,
it's another question I have for you. I mean, I feel that way towards Palestine, Egypt, which are like I'm naturally more oriented to, specifically because of Gaza being so close to home, and Sudan shares a border with Egypt too. Sudan is very close to a lot of places that I really love, both actually, like Sinai and Marsa Alam. So it's a very confusing time for me to, first of all, be living in the Bay Area, thinking that I can be facilitating a conversation like this and making a change in the world, right? Versus also not talking about it, which feels equally bad. And on our episode, we talk a lot about kind of owning up to our own responsibility, owning up to our own ideas of privilege, of being able to have this conversation and streaming through the laptop and having Wi-Fi is a lot of matter of chance rather than the fact that we are better. Sure, we were talking earlier about how working hard gets you places, but it's, I'd say, like 80 or 90% is a matter of circumstance, including what religions we have and which side on the spectrum we are on. And we both come from places where a Muslim dominant government is subjugating a Christian minority versus what we see with Palestine, which is the opposite. And I wonder, how are you making sense of your own sense of responsibility or your position towards the world, as someone who also lives in South Africa, has a nice life, but is affected deeply by all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the overwhelming sensations is it's a feeling of shame, and it's like a refined, complex, multi-layered kind of shame
the
that's
good
been
stuff.
aged for a while. There's shame about, I mean, my relationship with Sudan in particular is complicated. My parents are Sudanese. I carry a Sudanese passport, but I wasn't born there, never lived there, would only go back to visit. And even then, when things were relatively idyllic and peaceful, and there was a possibility for flourishing that doesn't exist right now, there was some degree of shame for not knowing the place well enough, not being connected to it, not really being Ibn al-Balad, like a son of the soil who can speak the vernacular and who knows, where you go to get a good meal. And then that, I think, today takes the shape of shame around how disconnected I am from of another Sudanese person. Shame from how my future, my prospects, my life, my privilege are basically operating in a different universe because of these accidents of fate that you described, where I was born, who I was born to, what opportunities life presented me with. But I think it's also a shame about how easy it is to separate. It's not just about Sudan, but how easy it is to separate my day-to-day human wants, needs, joys, suffering from those of so many millions of others, whether they're in Sudan or whether they're in Gaza or whether they're in Egypt or whether they're probably 10 miles from here.
Yeah.
Where the things that I take for granted and which I think should be taken for granted, the fundamentals of a dignified human life, aren't universally available. And you want to say you believe in those things, but you also have to somehow carry yourself through the day knowing that at the end of the day, the world has probably moved further away from making those things available rather than closer.
Yeah.
And I think it's a civilizational thing. I think probably all people are feeling some degree of dissonance between the world as they would want it to be and the world as it really is, and a degree of powerlessness. And yeah, I think we should be ashamed.
And on the other hand, I'm really interested in health overall. My story has been going through medical school and then figuring out that I knew a lot about sickness. And so a big part of this whole Gumption project is me trying to figure out what is the definition of health. And what you just said resonates a lot, because we are meant to think that we can be our own health, our own individual health, if we do certain protocols and oil the machine and do our meditation, that we can just be healthy regardless of what's happening around the world, including all around us. Like the Bay Area has a lot of suffering that we tend to not want to look at. And I hear a lot of people complaining about the people that can't afford homes, the people that are like sitting out and like they look at these conditions as something that impacts them, and then they create their own suffering, and it's like, so it's still impacting them, it's still creating suffering, but through that separation. So I really appreciate that notion that we can only be free when everyone's free, and we can only be healthy when everyone's healthy. We can't really like separate that from ourselves. But then again, we only have responsibility. That's why it's tricky, because we can only be responsible for our actions. So I'm wondering, what are some of the actions that you take, maybe on both a personal level, but also with the African Leadership Academy, on addressing how you see the world, addressing how you want the world to show up in a different way, and also like dealing with the shame, because shame kind of festers and is really hard to live a normal life when we're carrying it.
Yeah. Well, I first want to say, I mean, I've really admired the courage with which you've been on this Gumpcast journey.
Thank you.
Putting yourself out there, inviting other people into the space, even when you're not sure entirely where you're headed and the direction has changed a couple of times.
I have no idea how the next couple of hours are going to go.
And it's cool. Like there's courage, there's a willingness to leap, there's the vulnerability, and I feel, I'm probably not using the right language, and the other people who you'll talk to will know these things better than I do, but it definitely feels like there's a relationship between a willingness to be vulnerable and expose the things that feel shameful, and your ability to transcend them and live through them. Although I do want to say, like, I don't think it's about eradicating that. I think it's about acknowledging that that's a signal. It's a meaningful representation of the disconnect between what you want the world to be like, yourself to be like, and what it currently is, and that can motivate if you can consolidate it well. I can't say that I have practices that are well formed for how to live through this, except, I think what's been useful to me most immediately, last year at the end of a very difficult year, I had the opportunity to do a long course, which you've done as well.
Funnily enough, we stumbled into Vipassana
at the same
time,
independently. There's some synchronicity there.
Yeah.
And I frankly, I don't want to evangelize, and I certainly am not in a position to say that this is good or good for people, but I've been really surprised by the impact that it's had on me. And the only thing that I feel, something that I can feel confident saying is, it certainly feels like so much of the coping mechanisms that are provided to us to get through the days, the weeks, the years, put a distance between us and ourselves. And if you remove that noise, if you remove the technology, you remove the conversations, you remove the podcasts that you're listening to in the shower and in the drive, and always the input. Sitting with yourself is painful, but it feels like a really clarifying thing to do. And then just to talk a little bit about the work. It's really great to work with young people. So African Leadership Academy, I work with 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds who've decided that they, want to challenge, want to take on an approach to education that's different, live in a community that's motivated by an aspiration for a better future. And the more I do the work of, putting teenagers on trajectories that hopefully will multiply their impact over the course of their lifetime, the more I'm convinced that an education that builds agency and responsibility is the kind of education that's going to heal young people and heal the world. I think, as we can see, there's any number of crises for us to choose. Basically, every light is blinking red on the human dashboard, right? It's not great. And there's like sparks in the corner, and there's wires dangling from the ceiling. It's not awesome. And at the same time,
complete power outage yet.
Yeah, exactly. And at the same time, like, I think most people who work in education have noticed that the pandemic accelerated trends that were already going in the wrong direction for young people and teen, and particularly adolescent mental health. And there's probably a degree of, loss of agency, despair, existential kind of angst that has always existed for teenagers, but I definitely think it's in a particularly bad place right now. And I think that if going to school with other people helps you come out of that place of disempowerment, feeling not only that you have some agency over yourself, you can acquire powerful skills and knowledge, but that you should put those skills and knowledge to use in solving problems that elevate the human condition universally, it feels like a no-brainer. And I feel lucky to do that work, but I will also say that probably just like everyone else, whether or not you're doing socially conscious or socially responsible work or not, there's days when you wake up or days when you're in the middle of a presentation and you just wonder, like, does this even make a difference? Or am I just assuaging my guilt, assuaging my shame? And again, like, I think, we demonize the demons. Maybe the demons are also doing some good, right? So that you don't get you don't get too full of yourself. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, thanks for the vulnerability of that.
Cool.
And I think it's, there's so much to unpack there. What demons should we let in? What demons should we listen to? What demons should we run away from? And when it comes to practices, I'm feeling very grateful that we're going to have Stacey Haynes, who we are in her house, who has taught me a lot of these practices and dealing with shame and how it's carried in the body and how to create a declaration and create a new reality. So I think you set us up for a lot of these conversations moving forward. And I just want to, before I let you go, I know you have a busy agenda, but I want to call Angie, and let's see if Ryan is still here. Yes, he is. Just want to bring you guys on stage and have like just see if we can have a chat.
Hello.
Hey, Angie.
Hi.
Well, gentlemen.
How are you?
Good. Omar, thank you so much for the invitation. This is such an amazing conversation, and I am learning so much. Phenomenal.
Thank you for that segment you recorded. It was very moving.
It's an honor.
Yeah, and thanks for just bringing your all to this and helping out with the event. And I just wanted to see first Angie and Ryan, if you guys had any reflections about what Hatem just said, or even any questions that you want to discuss, or any kind of thing that came up for you during this conversation.
I was just touched by the honesty and the vulnerability of what you shared. And your guys' connection too is so sweet. It's so like lovely just to be like I just listened to these guys for a while. It's so wonderful. And the depth, but there's lightness and heartfulness. It's just it's really great. So maybe if I had a question, it would be something to follow the thread of the demon that might have some value or something. And I just actually read, and Adam Grant wrote this book, Think Again. Great book. Put a plug in for that. But he talks about actually the benefit of the imposter syndrome. It's kind of linked with that as something that actually puts a check on one's assumption that they know what's happening. And I don't know if there's a question in there, but just maybe it's just an input or a addition that building on what you just shared as like there is value in that. Like I liked how you said that about maybe that's actually kind of keeping me like check a bit. Anything more you'd like to share there? I'd be interested in hearing too.
You have anything else to add on that?
No, I mean, I think you captured the sentiment exactly. I guess I'm trying not to ignore any of the signals, right? And we might be tempted to turn off the negative signals completely, but there's probably something useful in seeing the full picture. It's a really vague response, but yeah.
Appreciate that.
Angie, I'm curious to hear a bit more from you about your experience. Just kind of like, I think a lot of people have the experience that you had or have the ambition that you have, but aren't able to kind of like make it through the default world. And you and I were talking a little bit about like what challenges you need to go through and others that you need to go around. And if you can tell us just a little bit about your story in kind of creating the Destiny Lab. I know you've and you and I have the first episode of season 3. We've recorded it live together, and I'm excited to share that, where we go into your story. But just maybe like if you can tell us a little bit more about your journey in dealing with the systemic issues that you talked about, and especially when it relates to like these demons of which demons should you listen to and which demons should you challenge.
I would love to talk about that. And I just want to first say thank you for like holding the space. It's always wonderful to see such compassionate masculine energy. It always like fills my cup. So thank you, gentlemen, for the energy. Um, you know, what I talked about in that video was about overcoming oppression to basically be your best self, and I think when you grow up knowing that there's going to be prejudices against your race or your social class or your gender, it can be very heartbreaking and very confusing to navigate that. But and it's real, right? Systemic injustices are very, very real, especially now that I do have, a very profitable multi-million dollar MarTech company. I'm still going after, financing and Series A and things like that, where I'm sitting at tables with investors and I am just looked down upon. I know that I'm passed over. I have to prove myself. I have to prove my business intellect. And it kind of makes me laugh because it just, when does it stop? Like, when am I good enough? Um, so even I think my advice to anyone who is looking to not be a victim of their life or has felt the pressures um, of just any systemic injustice, I first want to just say, that I see you. I really, really do. And just because it's not blatant doesn't mean that it's not real, or even if it is blatant, it's heartbreaking. And as I mentioned in the video, I learned very early on to just find spaces that could see me. And even if they're few and they're rare, I was able to join, minority and women driven accelerators that really focused on some of the, mental aspects and emotional aspects that come with navigating the business world. And, being seen and recognized as like, okay, yes, women and minorities don't have that much access to capital and resources as other races. And to just hear that and be recognized for that, brings a lot more safety and peace to say, okay, so yeah, so even getting started, I was not financially literate. I never have been. I was always scared of my finances. I think it just comes with being like, maybe social programming around women and money. And especially like, growing up poor where my parents saved money under the mattress, so I was never really understood on like what a 401k was, what the stock market was, anything like that. So there was a lot of shame. And Hatima, when you were talking about the shame that comes with, overcoming anything, it can be numbing, right? So I think what had helped me push through that is what I didn't have in education or in resources, I had in resilience. You know, um, I'm a tough cookie, and I think anyone who has to climb several social classes to get to where she is has to be one, right? Um, And I used to really resent being so tough, having to be kind of in my masculine energy to climb management, to climb the corporate ladder, to have my voice heard. But it is a gift, and I'm able to give it back. But I had to develop a spiritual journey to understand why am I so imbalanced? Why are my energies so imbalanced for a decade? And it had to be. It had to be that way. And it wasn't necessarily always my fault. But I did suffer from a lot of the imbalance of my feminine and my masculine energies, having to navigate the business world. So I think anyone who's trying to just make it in entrepreneurship, it's a whole journey. Like anyone who's trying to lose weight, it can be as simple as like this analogy. You have to be resilient. You're not always going to get the results that you want. Anything that's worth having in this world it's going to test you. And there have been so many times that I wanted to give up, and imposter syndrome would literally paralyze me. I wouldn't move a project for months. I just wouldn't look at it. I didn't want to do anything about it. But I think if you have the emotional tools, the mental health and spiritual tools to say that, no, I am special, I am worthy, and I am just as important as everyone else, regardless of what society has told you or conditioned you to believe. So, for anyone who is suffering out there, I want people to know that you are so uniquely made and so special. And once we understand that, like really understand it, like no matter the years and years of people stripping that away from you, you start to fight for your rights. You start to feel disrespected. You start to almost feel entitled to your uniqueness. And that is beautiful. And no one knows oppression more than the oppressed themselves. So I hope that gives a little context or some advice to those who are suffering. And, Hasim, I really love what you said about just like a collective suffering, and I think sometimes we're in a generation now that can see like, oh, I want to work on myself. I want to be a better person. And I think that's beautiful because it's unlocking what I believe other generations didn't have before, which is permission to really invest in their emotional wellness, And I think the more awareness that we can get to that, it can open maybe just a small door for some collective healing.
Wow, thank you so much, Angie. Yeah, you really like addressed a lot of what we seem to be confused about very eloquently. And yeah, there's a lot to chat there. I feel just really glad to have the three of you there. Also, I mean, the three of you have played such an important supportive role in my life. And between the three of you, you also represent all 3 seasons of the Gumpcast, which is perfect.
That's how I see myself, is that season 2.
Yes, you are
That's
season
how I
2.
identify.
That's all you've become after all these years. You've just become season 2.
You are the embodiment.
That's why I like it.
Yeah,
I'm not complaining.
The audio quality has been much better than season 1. I'm sorry, Ryan. But luckily, Ryan and I are still like working together, so
cool.
We're gonna make up for it.
I got
but
there's a
season
shot at
3.
redemption.
What's that?
There's a shot at redemption for me.
Yes, yes. Even your video didn't play today, but we're
No, man. Talk about resiliency. You really put me through it.
Self-compassion. But season 3 though. Season 3 we had like a live audience and live music, so
you're leveling up.
Angie,
That's great.
Yeah. Angie waited and got the best layer of the pie so far. But yeah, thank you all. Just to close this off, we have a lot of guests and we have some special people already entering backstage. So we're gonna transition, but just wondering if we can go around and like just say one word or one thing that is keeping you going right now in these tough times. And maybe we start with Ryan, and then Angie, and then close with Hatem.
Oh, my heart goes to my daughter, 9-year-old daughter. That's just like so raw with life energy and like, just all of it. It's just the whole spectrum, It's just, and yeah, it keeps me going, right? Because it's like I want to do whatever I can to build a world where, like, yeah, she doesn't get that can continue to shine.
Yes.
Thank you. What about you, Angie?
What I'm taking away from this amazing experience at this moment is our need for more compassion, just so much more compassion. When you think you've given enough, can we go deeper? I mean, can we get obsessed and extremely curious about what it takes to be the true essence of compassion?
What about you as well?
I'm touched by both of these reflections. I'm in a moment of human connection, just really appreciating how big life can be and unexpected, and that, yeah, I mean, it's just crazy that we're sitting here when we've known each other for so long from a very, very different place in a very different time.
Yes.
And still everything feels familiar and feels real and is. And we can joke and laugh, and yeah, I'm holding on to that.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's receiving help from others during this time that's keeping me going. It's a new way of going about life, but asking for help and receiving help from all three of you in the past few weeks has been, that's what's keeping me going. Like, so allowing people to help me has been a new thing, and it's been a very rewarding experience. Thank you all so much for setting us up in such a beautiful, vulnerable, and wonderful way for the tough conversation ahead, where we're going to be diving into one of the most complex issues known to us, as far as like how to talk about it. I don't like the idea of it being a complex issue, because that allows us to kind of like create a veil, but I've certainly been having a hard time figuring out, back to what we were saying, like whether to talk about it or not and how. So I feel so just supported and held by the three of you. We're going to play another segment from the Nile Project by Mina Girgis, who we have a segment from. I don't know if we'll be able to play it right now, or we're going to put it on YouTube later, because if it was only Ryan's bad luck, then maybe we'll have a chance to play that segment, but it's pre-recorded. So I'm going to play a song from the Nile Project, which essentially helped spread the awareness around the 11 countries of the Nile that had a conflict, but it wasn't a conflict like Israel-Palestine, where it was on the citizen level. It was still about on the government level, and that project aimed to have them all kind of get to know each other through music and learning that they share instruments, they share a lot of sentiments about what the Nile means to them, and kind of changing the geography in that way. So we're going to play a song, and then I know you've all been cringing about hearing your voice, but I'm going to play after that a promo, which NG helped me put together for the Gumpcast, which is how I cringe, but I have to do it also. And we'll just ask you guys for your support. And then we're going to see if we can play that segment with Mina and Paul. Otherwise, you guys can watch it on YouTube. And we're just going to transition to Stacey Haynes and our special guests for tonight. And you're all special as well. But that's the main show. So thank you all so much for being here.
Thanks, Omar.
Thank you, Omar.
Omar.
This is a really fun song. So make sure to watch it before you log off.
يا مصيبة وجت من بدري زي الصاروخ حاجة اسمه مصري ولا حاجة اسمه سودان. بحر النيل راسه في ناحية رجليه في الناحية التاني. بحر النيل راسه في ناحية رجليه في الناحية التاني. فوقاني يروح في داهية إذا كان سابوت تحتاني. هنا يا شكي بكيرينجي
الله ذهبنا حطي يا أحمدنا ديونت انتي ولعبوا المريض أصيحنا فطرنا ومسكو يا حبي. الله ذهبنا حطي يا أحمدنا ديونت انتي ولعبوا المريض أصيحنا فطرنا ومسكو يا حبي. إنا يا شنجي دنجي 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 دنجي
Mgawano suluhisho la Kenya hili ni mama. Mavutano tuache tujumuike pamoja. Mgawano suluhisho la Kenya hili ni mama. Mavutano tuache tujumuike pamoja. Na ya shigirikirikiri.
أسود وأبيض يا برامة عايشين ويا بعضين. سوداني في عنده كرامة مصري ده برضو أخينا. أسود وأبيض يا برامة عايشين ويا بعضين. سوداني في عنده كرامة مصري ده برضو أخينا. اتنين جيران بلدنجي والحيطة جنب الحيطة. اتنين جيران بلدنجي والحيطة جنب الحيطة. الناس دي بلاوي تلنجي عايزين يخلوها شوكولاتة. انا يا شنجريكي دنجي 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 دنجي.
كاملة كده ستاني يا باين سكا عبرن نتقدم كزين بدستا كنيس بناي ندرس تنيانني عندنا بنفكر نبلتا وبوني. كاملة كده ستاني يا باين سكا عبرن نتقدم كزين بدستا كنيس بناي ندرس تنيانني عندنا بنفكر نبلتا وبوني. انا يا شنكري كري كري دنجي 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 دنجي
الأكل بتاعنا براوة يشهد له اللي والباشا. يوم فاصوليا وبقلاوة يوم ملوخية وبغاشة. الأكل بتاعنا براوة يشهد له اللي والباشا. يوم فاصوليا وبقلاوة يوم ملوخية وبغاشة. يا أوروبا خليك شايل عالبلدي كتر للي. يا أوروبا خليك شايل عالبلدي كتر للي. الراية بتاعنا واحد لازم يستنى تملي. أنا يا شنجري كري كري دنجي 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 دنجي
Fulmer has been a dear friend of mine for over a decade, and I could not see a better man to deliver this kind of message on this kind of platform than Omar. If today moved you, we humbly and kindly ask you to subscribe as a Gumption member so that we can continue creating content that matters. It's only $65 a year. You get access to the latest health content and new meditations. access to a WhatsApp group with show guests and other like-minded peers, discounts on other services, including live events and books. And trust me, I'm a member as well, and this membership is worth its weight in gold. We are forming a tribe, and your contribution creates events, content, and spaces like this. Today would not be possible without the donations and subscriptions from our tribe members in the audience today. You can join as a member on findgumption.com. You can be a free or paid member, but if today's event moved you, we need you in our tribe. I have personally been through the 6-week Gumption program, and it is life-changing. I found the blocks and voices that were holding me back from my highest potential, and I thank Omar for all his help.
We are living organisms. The body, the psychology, the self, the longing spirit, our relational way of being is through a body. And I feel like we are so deeply shaped by the social narratives, the political narratives, the narratives of power, who deserves and who doesn't. That all gets into our tissues, into our cells, into our belief systems. And then we often reenact that even when we don't believe in it. And often I'll say soma because it breaks up that automatic listening of body. It's like, how's your soma? What's happening in your soma? Which just basically means your lived embodied experience. So that's what we mean by body and somatics. It's pretty different. And that there's wisdom and sensation, there's information and aliveness or pulsations that goes along with our thinking and our emotions and our relationships. It's not separable until we die, and then it's a mystery. And I think the body plays an essential role in transformation, like the kind of transformation where we're changed and can be and do and love in different ways than we maybe learned to before. Here we are.
Too many screens here.
We have a lot of screens.
Stacy, welcome back to the Gumpcast.
Delighted. Happy to
Same
be
here.
here with you. And
Thank
what
you
a fun night with everyone coming in and out of the space.
Yes.
It's great.
I was just about to say thank you for hosting us.
Delighted.
In your courses and your talks, I'm usually used to watching this background. So I associate it with you, and it's kind of very strange to be the one in front of it, I feel like. I am the one presenting now, and I'm in the scene, so that's great.
I like that, the shift.
Yes. Thank you so much for just being such a supportive person to me through your courses, as a friend, and through like these projects together. And it's really you've played such a huge role in my life. So thank you. And somatics has played a huge role in my life this past few months.
I'm so glad it is resonating. It feels so aligned with what you're about, you know, what you long for, all of those things. So I'm glad it resonates. Yeah.
Yes. And so Ryan has taught me internal family systems, and that's something that I've practiced and built a program around. But somatics really gave me this missing piece of the puzzle where I'm able to access a lot of the things that have been just accumulated throughout my lifetime because of where I'm from, because of what I've been through, because of like experiences that I've had, and things that I didn't necessarily have the resources to work through back then, like medical school, which more recently I've been able to kind of tap into that through the program that we're almost done with. It's crazy that we're...
I know, next week.
Yes. Yeah. How long has this program been running for?
5 months, almost 6 months, yeah.
Very transformative 5 months. I could not have needed it more, especially because of this conversation that we're going to...
And the timing.
Timing, yes.
We started on October 10th.
October 10th.
Boom.
Yes.
And now we're,
and now we're here.
And now we're here,
And now we're here in February, and this is still going on.
Yes.
People are still dying on a daily basis.
Yeah.
We're experiencing this kind of like burnout also, I think, from being able to hear about it or talk about it versus staying away to kind of just regenerate. And I think it would be interesting for you to talk about resilience to start off with just the definition of resilience from a somatic perspective.
Yeah.
And what I learned was really interesting. So why don't we start there?
Okay, good. I have that on my notes too.
Perfect.
Very exciting. We're aligned. To me, what's important when we talk about resilience is often people connect resilience with something traumatizing or highly difficult. It's like, this is how I got through it. Or it gets politically misused, right? Where it's like, well, those people, they're so resilient, they'll be okay. Kids, they won't remember anyway, right? Poor people are so resilient, like all the stereotypes that go along with basically minimizing or allowing oppression or violence to continue, right? So in somatics, we really go, resilience is inherent in our beings. It's not inherently connected to trauma. It's inherent in who we are. We have it. And then what we're looking for inside of somatics are, what are those experiences we've already had of feeling awe or delight or wholeness or connected to something so much bigger, really letting ourselves track to the experiences we've already had. You know, one of the phrases I like to use is, we are more resilient and we are more powerful than what's happened to us, because actually we're still here and we're still trying to act and connect and love and make a difference. I'm like, okay, what's that? That's something big, right, inside of us. So resilience, we look at those pieces and we go, okay, here's an experience that I had. How did that show up? How do I feel that through my body? What's it like to reconnect with it now? And then how do I cultivate that by feeding it over and over again? And what resilience is helping us do is not be reactive or be less reactive, and be more connected to, as your last guest said, you've had many great guests, but more deeply connected to ourselves, to each other, to the world, from a space that's more centered and more loving. And cultivating our resilience helps us do that. Yeah. It's not just bearing through something.
Yeah, thank you. That's a refreshing definition from grit, bearing through something, this kind of energy. And redefining resilience as perhaps being in nature, perhaps writing was for me, like just the things that kind of fill us up with joy, like that first song that we started off with.
Exactly, yeah. Let me say, because you just added it, to be concrete. So much of like places for us to look to find inherent resilience are through the creativity, for you writing. Definitely nature, and that could be a house plant or that could be the wilderness. Meaningful connection with other people is often resilience giving, or folks' connection to what's more vast, to spirit or God, or however someone experiences that. Those are places that are naturally resilience giving, and places we can look to rediscover it.
Yeah. So in our episode, which was episode 17 of season 2, you shameless plug.
I love you have it
memorized. You should really watch it. Yes, and I have all of your voices in my head all the time. Like there's certain sound bites, like the ones that we played now. And for our next guest, Omar Dajani, his voice is constantly in my head, for better or for worse. But it's so luckily I choose people that I really like hanging out with. And one thing that I really appreciated about this episode is that you grounded it in first how you used somatics to create space for your mother's passing away, which a lot of people resonated with, and it hit home for a lot of people. And the second aspect was that you then did a practice to show me what it's like. And in your book, The Politics of Trauma, you keep saying that it's really hard to talk about somatics. And today we're going to kind of really give it a big task in seeing how that plays a part in this conversation mostly between Arabs and Jews all around the world. And we're seeing a lot of both anti-Semitism and Islamophobia happening because of what's going on. And we all have different ideas about what is happening. And this idea of like an embodied experience in conflict seems to be just, it makes a lot of sense to me. And in my case, it was like in heartbreak, and that was like what the episode was about, like losing of a loved one, whether divorced in my case or passing away in your case. And I'm curious to know what kind of practices can we do before we bring on our guests to kind of just give people a flavor of that. And
Mm-hmm.
and I wonder if anyone from the audience actually wants to join us. I think there is a way to bring you guys backstage. So if you want to leave a comment, especially those that are on the on-air thing, I'm just gonna give people a chance. If anyone watching wants to come on stage, or maybe even Omar and Mira can be the ones doing it. I don't know, or should we just do one together? What do you think is best? I don't know.
It's fine. If someone pops up, we can do it. Otherwise, you and I can get started as maybe the invitation, and folks can join us later. Because, this is like, come on for what you don't know. It's about to happen.
Yes.
I do want to, for a minute, though, I want to talk for a moment about what we mean by embodied transformation, because I think that piece feels really important and why practice is a part of that. So what we really mean by somatic or embodied transformation is that we've transformed when our way of being, our actions, right, are more and more aligned with our values and our vision. And that feels very important because we talk a lot in somatics about what is your vision, what is your longing, both for yourself, your community, the world. And we have all these survival strategies and hurts and wounds and shame we've already talked about that throws us into reaction. And that is not just a mental thing. It is a physiological, psychobiological set of processes that go on that can have us being and acting in ways that are not aligned with actually what we care about at all. And we learn so many of those patterns, of course, through our personal and lived experience, but also through our social context. Like why, I think about this, why generation after generation do we learn patriarchy? Why do we keep learning white supremacy? Now, that's systems, but it's also what's passed on very deeply through practice and survival strategy and what's the right way to act and be. That also gets passed on person to person, family to family, community to community. And I'm so fascinated in somatics how we transform that to have a much deeper capacity for interdependence, for justice, and of course tonight for holding complexity even when we're in pain. Yeah. So practice is a part of that.
Yeah.
And there's other parts of it too, but practice is important. So
yeah, thanks for elaborating on that.
Do you want to center together?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If folks want to, you can stay seated or you can stand. Is it cool? Can I fit in the screen if I stand?
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Let's do it. Can we do it together? You want to stay seated? You want to stand?
I'll give the seated version.
Okay, you do the seated version. I'll do the standing version. All right. Inside of every practice is a purpose, right? So we're not kind of just exercising or going to gym class, but we have a purpose. Yeah, I messed up the screen. There you go. And inside of centering, what we're practicing doing is getting present, right? Getting connected and getting like aligned with our purpose or what it is we care about. And we're doing this through the nervous system. We're doing it through the body. So it doesn't just stay a good idea. Like under pressure, much deeper things react in our systems. And so we want to be training our whole soma, or training our whole body. So this is simple, but if you'd like to join us, that'd be awesome. So first thing we want to do is just bring your attention from your thinking self down into your feeling and your sensing. Yeah, so that means just notice what temperatures do you feel in your body right now. Maybe you feel warmer at your core or cooler at your fingertips. But you can just notice kind of, okay, head, chest, belly, hips, lower body. What temperatures am I noticing? Those are always happening in current time. And then you might also know where you feel more relaxed or where you feel more tense. Yeah, we're just going to keep bringing our attention down into the body and out of chattering with ourselves in our minds, which is what we can spend so much time doing. Yeah. Take maybe a conscious 2 breaths and bring your attention, follow your breath down into your body. All right, on that second breath, if you want to put your hand down just below your belly button, This is where we're going to orient with center. This is our center of gravity when we're standing. Anyone who plays music or dances or does sports, you know, we initiate movement from here, right? Not necessarily from our heads. So bring yourself there. See if you can feel your center from the inside out. And if you can, bring a breath there again. You can leave your hand there, you can let it go. And we're going to center in 4 dimensions. Yeah, so we're going to center first in length. So basically from the inside out, fill in your full length. So you're dropping your attention down into your lower body, into your seat and feet. If you're seated, yeah, lower, drop your weight down and then lengthen up at the same time. So it's kind of like a French press. I'm settling down, I'm lengthening up. I'm finding the earth or the floor beneath my feet, and I'm letting myself notice the sky above me. Yeah, that's always happening for us. We're the connection between the earth and the stars, huh? Inside of length, we're centering, balancing in length, and centering inside inherent dignity, right? The inherent dignity of all life, including you. So relaxing and centering in length is our first dimension, okay? And then from there, let's center in width. That means widening out left and right across your collarbones. If you want to wiggle in a little bit, you can. Across your hips, across your feet. So from this center line, widening out. Yeah, we think about this really as a dimension of connection. I can let myself out, I can let others in, I can connect. Yeah, so we want to be connected to self, but widen out and be with and notice others. Yeah. See if you can find your left and your right hip. Great, your shoulders, maybe even your ears, widening, centered in width, balanced left and right. All right, we have centered in length and dignity. We have centered in width and connection. And let's come into depth, right? Back side, inside, front side. So let's put our attention on our back bodies first. So many of our devices and screens pull us forward. So see if you can notice the back of your heart. Maybe bring more breath into the back of your lungs. See if you can find the back of your own legs. You know, behind us, 3 billion years of evolutionary wisdom on this planet. That's a big tail. Yeah, or you can tie into your ancestors, known and unknown. Or what friends, teachers, right? Other people have your back. So staying connected to your back, go ahead and come into your insides. See if you can make just a little bit more space in your depth, a little bit more space for life, for sensation. Yeah, in your depth. Maybe a little bit bigger breath front and back. And then all the way to your front side. Maybe you can find your sternum or the tip of your nose, or just let yourself feel into the space in front of you. And then balance yourself back and front. Yeah, we're centering inside of depth, being connected to what came before our moment in history, and then our intentions, right? Our visions, and also the unknown that's in front of us. And then let's put it all together, centered in length, right? Balance and centered in length and dignity, centered in width and connection, centered in depth, right? Connected to what's come before and also looking forward. And the very last thing we do as we're present, open, connected, right, in our bodies, is let yourself center really on who and what matters to you. And we're going to have very deep conversations tonight about some of the best and worst of human beings. Yeah. What matters to you, or what's your calling? Center inside of that. You could even bring an image or speak it to yourself. Right? So we keep using that as a guide and as a rudder, and how we be and how we live and how we grow. All right, thank you for practicing with us. And I might just gently remind us through the conversation, like, let's take a moment and recenter as a place to come back to ourselves. Yeah. Yeah. What do you want to add?
I'm too into it right now.
Okay.
I'm deeply centered.
Yay. Good.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
This has been a really helpful practice. So this was like the core practice in the program, right? We started off with that, and I was doing that. You recommended 5 times a day. I was doing more like 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm. That's good still.
And I think one of the interesting things is that it's more of it feels like just like stretching, like similar to what I do in Qigong, but there is the intention behind every dimension. And especially the one with like opening of the shoulders with relationship, that I think is very relevant to us today. But every time I opened it up, it's this like length being dignity, and then width being I'm opening myself up to have a relationship or a tough conversation in a relationship. And remembering that we go through most of life doing this. When I was younger, I was like I very much had an arched back, and that was like kind of, we make ourselves smaller in that way, and also like protect ourselves from people, like close on our heart. So that's been a really helpful thing. The depth is weird, because it's like, okay, what is this? But then that reminds me that I'm not what I see. That's how I translate it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And it's something that I forgot after like all the anatomy lessons and stuff like that, that there's so much going on inside of this soma, as you call it, not just the body, including the thoughts, and then like layering ancestry and all of that is just such a powerful notion. And then finally centering on purpose, and what do we want in the world. And I think that's like the most liberating thing about the practices that you've taught me, is that you can then declare a new world, which following up on the conversation so far, we really we need one. We do. The power of imagination has never been more needed. Vital, yeah.
Completely. Yeah.
Anything else you'd like from me before I give you the stage and bring on our guests?
No, I'm just so happy to be here. Thank you for your trust. Thank you for the invitation. And I don't know what's going to happen next either, other than we're going to have a rich, engaged, hopefully revealing conversation.
Yes. Thank you for taking on the task. And our next guests are 2 people that are really working on reimagining a new life, and have a lot of credentials in that area, but they choose to, despite seeing things and having their own differences politically, working on kind of bridging a conversation that can actually be generative. And it's really exciting to bring them on and see what will happen, because I've never seen them talk about this before, so it's going to be very new to me. So thank you so much for being here. I'll let them introduce themselves when they're on.
Great.
And we're just going to play a segment from the first episode of season 2, which was with Omar Dejani, who's our guest. And a lot of people have been practicing and thanking you for Andy. Good to see you, and Satya. See, that was beautiful and centering. Thank you for guiding. So I hope you have fun. We'll play this quick segment from Omar Dejani's episode, and then I will be gone and I will watch it. And also I want to tell people that are in the audience, if you want to join the Q&A, also just let me know in the chat section, and then I'll bring you backstage. So we can totally do that. Don't be shy. Ask them questions. We want you to be part of this conversation. There are a lot of people that are working on this. I think Basil is on here with us. Natalie, perhaps too. I'd love to have you guys become part of the conversation once it's over. That's why we created the 3-hour event. So just let me know in the chat, and I'll bring you backstage if you guys are on. Without further ado, here is a little bit of my episode with Omar Dajani. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
I appreciate this.
You're welcome.
Self-determination is important to people. It is linked to, if not exactly the same thing as nationalism, right? So on the one hand, what we want to see is how do we give both peoples meaningful self-determination, and yet at the same time honor the fact that both peoples are attached to all of the land. I mean, we used to talk about Palestine in quotation marks as being the West Bank and Gaza Strip. My father's family comes from Jaffa, which is right in the middle of what's now Israel, just below and now part of the municipality of Tel Aviv. Until 1948, most of the action socially in Palestine was in what's now Israel. And conversely, the kingdoms of ancient Israel were not in the coastal plain, they were in what they called Judea and Samaria. And so the notion that we can simply disavow our connection to place is really problematic too.
Are we all here? Yay, hi. Good to see you all. I love that you're together.
I know, it's such a fun treat because normally we're bi-coastal in our communications.
So
it's
great.
So good to see you this time.
Yes, exactly. Will you all introduce yourselves?
Yes.
What do you want us to know?
I'm Mira. My last name is Sukharov. I live in Canada and I grew up in Canada. I grew up in Winnipeg. I guess for the purposes of this topic, one of the key things is I grew up in a very tight-knit Jewish community. And I went to Hebrew immersion camp, summer camp, Hebrew Jewish and Hebrew day school, and grew up with a very natural and close connection to Israel. And when I went to university, when I was 18, I remember how I phrased it. I said to myself, I want a broader view. And so I majored in Middle East studies. And that took me to where I am today as a professor of political science. And I specialize in Israeli-Palestinian relations. And I'm really happy that I found Omar to collaborate with on lots of things.
Thanks, Mira.
And I'm Omar Dajani, also known as Omar Dajani, but I only learned to pronounce my name later in life. I'm of Palestinian origin. My father was Palestinian, my mother Syrian and French. I grew up mainly in East Texas and went to Palestine, Israel, for the first time in 1999 when, as a young lawyer, I was hired to work as a legal advisor to the Palestinian negotiating team in the peace talks that were just beginning to try to resolve what some people call the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. We failed, and we are living with the consequences of that failure, and that's something that we will, I'm sure, have a lot of occasion to talk about today. But that time there was transformative for me. It was the moment, it was a period during which I think I discovered the parts of my identity that resonated the most deeply. And some of that was about the relationships with people that I was able to build while I was there. And so a lot of the work that I've done since then as a professor, as a sometimes policy analyst and sometimes activist, including now as a board member of an organization which we'll tell you about later called A Land for All, which Mira also supports as a member of the U.S. Steering Committee. A lot of what I work on emerged from and is linked to the work that I did while I was there in Palestine, Israel, Palestine.
Thank you. Thank you. You know what? I'm just going to locate myself too, so people know, since I'm the somatics lady, but I should know a little bit more about myself. Stacy, I grew up in the States in rural Colorado, working class, white family. I'm Gentile. My lived experience really politicized me. And then I had amazing professors, I had amazing teachers. So thank you for what you all are doing. And I really got educated into what's happening in Palestine and Israel through my activism work, and went to Palestine and Israel for the first time in 2005, bringing somatics and trauma healing work to the Palestinian Counseling Center in Ramallah. And I was there on a delegation that was organized by anti-Zionist Jews in the United States, and spent a month in doing lots of different things, political education, again, working with folks around somatics, trauma, and intergenerational healing. And have also feel like, as a white Gentile in the United States, have really had to deeply dive into how I inherited anti-Semitism through the culture and really do that deeper unpacking work around Jewish liberation. So there I am, seated as we join. Yeah, awesome. All right, I want to start with a vision question for both of you. Yeah, so as we kind of dive into what is just a radically painful conversation and painful time, what is the longing or what's the vision that you, I don't know, that has you going in life and has you going in your work?
By that, do you mean what would I most love to see one day if I could make it happen? If I could help make it happen, what do I most want to see over there?
Well, you could do Queen of the World for sure. You can definitely do that. I love that. And I think I'm asking a little bit more internal question, like what's your longing? What's your longing that keeps you doing the work you're doing?
I think I would answer that through the set of values that motivate me, I think, is what I'm hearing. And so for me, it's compassion, dignity, wanting to uphold people's dignity, both individually and collectively. And I really like to nurture culture. I like different distinct cultures and languages. I don't desire a flattening. I don't desire a sameness across everyone. And so really how to make everyone feel seen for their distinctiveness, but also to also feel human. And so looking for, I guess, bridging across difference, ultimately for the aim of making connections with other beings.
Thank you. Omar, what about you?
I think I would start with the idea of connection as well. I think, as I alluded to earlier, what moved me when I first went to live in Ramallah, like you did, was the ways in which I felt connected to that place and to the people I was encountering, and not only to Palestinians, but certainly to Palestinians while I was there. And I think that having this place and people to who I feel so deeply connected in a predicament not only of suffering, of profound suffering, but also of such lack of peace, inner and outer, of a lack of the deep feeling that things are awry there, that they are off, that they are off kilter, leaves feeling like I need to do something, however small, and I don't have delusions of grandeur on this front. I need to do something to fix that, to contribute. Mira, whom I have worked with now on a lot of things for the last couple of years, noted that I have this tick that I'm constantly appearing to wipe crumbs off the table in front of me.
Wow.
And I think that there's something in me that is trying to kind of, I don't know if it's smooth the wrinkles or clear the space, because the ways in which it's so disordered, and the costs that imposes take a toll on me physically.
Yep, that's beautiful. I'd like to ask you both, and we can split this or you can both do it, but I'd love to just ask you what is happening in Palestine and Israel right now. How do you see it?
I see enormous suffering, destruction, death. There was a time where every morning I would wake up since October 8th, when the Israeli assault on Gaza began, to see the rising death toll of Gazans and trying to figure out how many children. It used to be roughly half of the total was children. I think we're maybe now at 27,000. I think about the massive trauma across Gaza, in the West Bank. I think of the massive trauma across Israel, as they heal from the October 7th Hamas attacks, at the same time as having lost all confidence in their government. So there's a sense of, I think, many Israelis feeling leaderless, with a leader who is wanting to do everything that he can to stay a leader till the end of his days. So it's easy to fall into despair, but I'm really doubling down on hope and really thinking about what the small things I can do to get us there. And I tend to, I tend to not end my sentences with despair. I try to think about action.
I think that what is happening there has a lot of frames, and it's difficult to use just one frame for thinking about it. And so, in part, what we see unfolding there is a colonial struggle, a desire of people, the Palestinians, for liberation from an experience of having the space where they'd lived for centuries, colonized by a people from elsewhere, whom they perceive to be from elsewhere. And so there is this dimension of a settler colonial struggle. There's a dimension of national struggle of two peoples, the Palestinian people and the Jewish people, seeking self-determination, and each seeking self-determination for some of the same reasons, because they want a space in which to exercise, to be themselves, to express themselves, and culturally, to feel safe, to teach their children their own stories. And so there is this struggle over which of these processes of self-determination, or which of these aspirations for self-determination will be permitted to be realized. Israel's has in part, the Jewish people's has in part, Palestinians not yet. It's also a daily struggle for, and this is maybe the lawyer in me speaking, individual rights, for individual people to live their lives normally. And that is a struggle that the dimensions of which are most familiar to me in relation to Palestinians, to the profound insecurity that they experience every single day, the restrictions on their ability to move, much less for Palestinians in the West Bank to vote, and a range of other, to deal with a range of other degradations. But it's also something that I think Israeli Jews experience. They have an array of formal rights, but live with an abiding fear, which Palestinians find incomprehensible in view of the power disparity between our two peoples, but which I think is a very deep and powerful dimension of what moves them. And so I could go on and on, as you both know. But as I think about this place, I find speaking about more than one frame really crucial.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mira, will you add to that just the complexity of multiple frames and also give us kind of the 100-year view? No pressure.
No pressure. I like what Omar said about each group wanting to tell their own stories. And a big part of the Zionist dream, so if we're talking about 100 years and more, so the Zionist movement started in the latter part of the 19th century in Europe. And the idea there was not only to keep telling the stories of centuries, millennia of Jewish oppression, as we do on Passover when we have a booklet. Maybe Stacey, you've probably been to a Passover Seder, I'm guessing. Mm-hmm. And I'm waiting for Omar to be on this side of the continent so he can come to ours one day. And you read from a book that means the telling, and it's the story of the Exodus. And the big part of the Zionist dream was to enable Jews to gather together to not only tell their stories in the past, but to write new ones. And that has been, for me, very exciting as I grew up with Israel as a second home and knew Hebrew from a tender age and was able to engage in Israeli culture and Hebrew culture and write my own Hebrew songs when I was a little kid and perform them in song festivals and in my community of Winnipeg. And as I've gotten older and expanding my knowledge base, I'm appreciating getting to know Arabic culture as well, and Palestinian culture, Arabic language culture, and Palestinian national culture. And I mean, I think that's what ultimately every group wants, is to be able to live freely and nurture themselves and be recognized. So 100-year view. So Zionism started in the late 19th century. The first wave of Zionist immigrants came from Europe to what was then Palestine in 1880. In 1917, there was the Balfour Declaration. So Great Britain signaled their intention to support the establishment of a Jewish national home. Great Britain was the holder of the mandate, which was that part of the Middle East that had been assigned to various European powers. So Great Britain got sort of quasi-control administration, not full sovereignty, but maybe stewardship, we could call it, over Palestine. And this document was viewed as a victory for Jews there, for Zionists, but it was very ambiguous. A Jewish national home. It didn't say a state, and it said without prejudicing the civil or religious rights of the existing non-Jewish communities. So there was always a question of what the non-Jewish communities, meaning Palestinian Arabs who were both Muslim and Christian, what kinds of political rights they might one day enjoy. So that was left out. The word political rights was left out altogether.
At the same time, those Brits made promises to some other folks, including the Arabs, in the Hussein McMahon correspondence, where the Brits said to the Arabs, hey, if you'll rise up against the Turks and help us in our war effort, then we will ensure your independence. And so the Brits were promising at the same time, we believe, the same piece of land to two different peoples. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, and so both
the Brits being, the biggest colonizers in recent history.
That's right.
And so in a sense, both peoples were both courted by Great Britain and also limited by them. And so really, I would think of it more in a triangular way at the time. Ultimately, the UN, the United Nations General Assembly, took the step of recommending partition in 1947. General Assembly resolutions are not binding. They are signals of the will of the international community as it exists at any one time. So they recommended partitioning the land, the mandate of Palestine, into a state for Palestinian Arabs, state for a Palestinian state, and a Jewish state. And the Jewish community in Palestine, the Zionist movement, begrudgingly accepted it. The Palestinians rejected it. That was in November of 47. And then in the months following, the Zionist, the pre-state Jewish community in Palestine, the pre-Israeli state forces consolidated. And that's when Omar's father comes into the story.
Should I continue?
Yeah,
Please.
we'll tag team.
Okay, great. I would just add one, just a couple of things as background before we return to that point in the story. And so Mira, I think, very aptly or poignantly laid out the kinds of dreams that animated the Zionist movement. And these were dreams that, as Omar Shaker and I, discussed during that podcast he played a portion of, were in part inspired by nationalism, which was spreading around the world, emanating from Europe, an interest, the idea that people should achieve self-determination through the vehicle of a nation state. And so Zionists ended up settling on Palestine as the place where a Jewish state would be established. But as Mira alluded to, of course, there were already people in Palestine, Muslims, Christians, and Jews. And some of the Jews had lived in Palestine from time immemorial, as had Muslims and Christians. And it's a funny thing because Shlomo Sand, who's a professor at Tel Aviv University, has sort of espoused the theory that many of us Palestinians are actually descendants of the ancient Hebrews. And so the idea that we're all separate people is a tricky one, thinking about it genetically. And when I did my inevitable genetic testing, as it seems like we all have, I was struck by the fact that my genes link me to Ashkenazi Jews. And so the blood tells all in a certain way. Anyway, back to the story. So at the period that Mira is talking about in the early 20th century, Palestine was home to a substantial population of Muslims and Christians, as well as Jews. And as the Zionist project unfolded, encouraging immigration of Jews from other parts of the world, very often in response to oppression, pogroms in Russia, and far, far worse, the Holocaust eventually, of course, as it unfolded, beginning in its early stages in the 30s and then in its full horror in the 40s, that flow increased. And so by the time 1948 arrives, we have about a third of the population being Jewish and 2/3 of it being Muslim and Christian. And this is part of what is the reason why Palestinians rejected the partition plan in 1947, why they said, we feel uncomfortable with 55% of the territory becoming a Jewish state, leaving 45% for us. What they were advocating at the time was a one-state solution, effectively, a single democracy. And of course, for Zionists, what they heard was that Jews would once again be a minority. And so you can see even in that moment in 1948, the ways in which the lines were drawn and Jewish fear intersected with Palestinians' ambition to have control over their own destiny, over their own lives. And so in 1948, as the civil conflict started to intensify, Zionist forces, who were better organized and better armed, in part because of British assistance, began a campaign of consolidating control over the territory that they had been assigned by the UN partition plan, and over some of the territory they hadn't been assigned, which was included the city that my family comes from, which is Jaffa.
Yeah.
And so Jaffa was bombarded from both directions in April of 1948. And it was in those circumstances that my family fled, figuring that they would be able to return within a few weeks. But Israel barred their return after its creation in May of 1948. And so there's so much more of the story. I'm going to hand it back over to Mira. Stacey, would you like us to continue, or do you want us to stop there?
Let's pause for a minute. Obviously, this is it takes many years to get as competent as you all are to understand the history, but it feels so important to have a much longer context, because current day narrative, this isn't the current day narrative, right? There's a very different narrative. So I want to shift for a minute and talk about trauma. And there's so much we can talk about here as well. But what do each of you want to say about intergenerational trauma driving into politics, the state, but also being manipulated and used for political agendas? Yeah, so there's like this real intergenerational trauma really for everyone at this point, but used in different ways. So talk to me about intergenerational trauma, what you're seeing, feeling.
Well, I grew up feeling untouched, feeling relatively directly untouched by the Holocaust. If I had relatives who perished, I didn't know who they were. And that was because most of my family, I guess all four of my grandparents, managed to come to Canada. Well, one grandparent was born in Canada and the other three came around World War I, which was when most of Canadian Jews came to Canada from Europe. But I then married a man in my 20s who's still my husband, and his father had been in Auschwitz for a year when he was 13 until he was 14. He was on that 1944 Hungarian deportation. So our children are the grandchildren of a Holocaust survivor. Mm-hmm. And so I think about the Holocaust much more directly because it really affects my children, and I feel that I feel that it's in them. And whether that's epigenetically, which there's of course some newer research on how trauma is transmitted within one's genes, or whether it's family narratives and collective memory that gets transposed. But I think part of the reason I was so drawn to Israel as a child was almost for the opposite reason, not as a refuge from anti-Semitism, which seemed to me something quite remote and something far away and something not connected to my experience, but more as a joyful expression of culture. And so when I eventually wrote my first book on Israeli-Palestinian peacemaking, I talked about Israeli Jewish narratives, and I talked about when I described Zionism, I talk about not only the push factors of fear and anti-Semitism, pogroms and persecution, and of course the Holocaust, but also the pull factors of wanting collective self-realization and wanting to be able to write your own story, even if it isn't only linked to wanting to escape persecution. So that's what I would say about intergenerational trauma personally. In terms of Israel, I think Israeli Jews have a very complicated relationship with intergenerational trauma. There was a lot of resistance to Holocaust survivors at first. They were called denigrating names, even within the Jewish Israeli community. There was a lot of shaming about the perception that Jews went like sheep to the slaughter. And so there was a real desire to create a self-reliance So I focus a lot culturally, but of course in Israel, it's not just that, it's also militarily, and to not have to rely on anyone for collective safety. So that's what I would say about that. Now, October 7th, the attacks of October 7th, I think created a whole new set of fears and collective positioning of Jews around the world, and particularly of Israeli Jews, of feeling like it's another Holocaust. And Jewish Israelis are describing Hamas actions as akin to Nazi actions. They say they're Nazis. When they're not calling them ISIS, they call them Nazis. So it's a very much a sense that the whole world is against us. Again, that's what we're hearing from many, many people in Israel. That's what I'm hearing from many, many Jews around me in my community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, complex. Omar, what do you want to add here?
I think I first want to sort of say a word about what Mira just said. You know, one of the things we've been talking a lot about is how these last few months couldn't possibly be more triggering. I think that I am someone as a Generation X guy who has sometimes resisted talking about triggers in my classroom. And I realize that that's retrograde of me. But even though that's so, I can't think of a set of experiences over these last few months that would do more to trigger earlier trauma. And of course, October 7th, what happened to Israeli Jews on October 7th is a great example of that. I mean, I think many of us have, you know, read or heard the stories of Jews in Eastern Europe waking up from one day to the next to find a mob sort of with, you know, fire outside their door, and for reasons that are not obvious to the individuals in mind, sort of just taking them out. And so I think, and some of this is, you know, very much a part of the received stories. Mira and I went to the Museum of the Jewish People together in Tel Aviv, and you see the ways in which that story is woven into the ways in which Jews understand their own experience over time in the world. Over and over and over again, whenever you feel safe, think again, you're not. And so you can see how utterly triggering a moment, I mean, an experience like this, which seems from their experience, of course, to come out of the blue. Palestinians have a different sense of context here, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But for them, something coming out of the blue like this, and it seems to confirm everything that made them fear the world as Jews, experience the world as an unsafe place. And the consequences of that, I think, are going to be very complicated in part, and we can talk more about this too, because the thing that they thought would keep them safe, being in a Jewish state, having a Jewish government with a strong Jewish army to protect them, didn't. And so that is problematic and maybe generative. Like we'll see how that plays out. On my own side, and there's so much I can say, but I'll try not to go on and on. I think about something that Mira and I have also been talking about lately, which is all of these images that one keeps seeing of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, with carrying mattresses, carrying all of their worldly possessions on their backs, balancing those things with children on their shoulders, and walking in streams. And one of the things we've noted is the different way in which people see those images, because when any Palestinian sees that image, all they can think about is the trauma of 1948. All they can think about is this defining moment in Palestinian history when, and again, apparently from one week to the next. I mean, in my father's case, he was studying for his tawjihi, the graduation exam, and then a week later he was a refugee, you know. And this sudden moment of being expelled from their lives as they knew it, this shattering of their lives in place, and then grabbing what you can, not even thinking clearly about what you're going to grab in that moment. My family, forgetting all of our family photos, right? My dad had been gathering them in one place to put them in an album, forgetting all of them, the most precious thing, and running. And so Palestinians see this thing that happened to 750,000 of our forebears in 1948 happening again. And so when others say, why won't the Palestinians flee, from their homes as they've been ordered to by the IDF? Why won't they vacate for their own safety, and even go one step further and imply that they're somehow to blame when they stay in their homes and perish as a consequence under missiles or bombs from the IDF? I see the answer very, very clearly. It's because they're thinking, no, we're not going to do it again. And so, as I started off by saying, this is such a triggering period.
Yep. And let's also talk about the intergenerational trauma of the Palestinian peoples. 48 is a few generations ago, and there have been displacement, death, displacement, and smaller pieces of land that there's any agency, right, of Palestinians to control or have a state. So lots of trauma. And it's interesting to me in the narrative, I mean, we're all sitting in the United States right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the United States funds a lot of what's happening right now and has for decades. So there's just that complexity that we just have to name and throw in here.
Complexity / complicity.
Utter complexity. I mean, cause. It wouldn't be possible without the funds,
That's
that
right.
we, send.
Weapons. Yeah.
It just wouldn't be possible what's happening. Exactly. We're part of every day of it. But to me, what's interesting is it feels like narratives of trauma because it's real intergenerational trauma for both peoples and obviously for so many people globally. But why is it that the narrative of trauma is much more used in the for the purpose of the Zionist or the Israeli cause? Because you'll talk to folks who maybe aren't educated and don't know what's going on, and the narrative right away will be, well, the Holocaust, and then these peoples need a place, and well, the Palestinians are terrorists anyway. Like right away, the trauma narrative gets used, and then a white supremacist or a racist narrative gets used. So I don't know, unpack some of that for us, or let us know what you think inside of that.
I think that in political, in acts of political persuasion, groups draw on whatever they have in their arsenal. And I don't think that Israel is unique in that way. I think Palestinians also draw on trauma to describe, to make parallels, to make analogies, as we've just been discussing, to make sense of the current moment, to justify demands, perhaps that don't need added justification. Demands for freedom don't need added justification, but one draws on that. So I don't think it's unique to Israel. There are certain leaders who will be more apt to do sort of rhetorical flourishes than other leaders. Bibi Netanyahu perhaps being one. He enjoys the stage. He's also a very skilled speaker. He's also more bilingual than any other prime minister except for Golda Meir, who was born in the US. Bibi Netanyahu spent formative years in the US. So I don't think it's something unique to Israel, but it's something that, Stacey, it sounds like you're noticing and it's concerning you.
Mm-hmm.
So feel free to tell us more about what you're seeing.
Mm-hmm. Let me say a little bit, and then Omar, I want to hear, because you two are, you're so knowledgeable. And I hear a couple of things repeated from folks who are concerned, worried, and then have inherited an interpretation or a narrative. And it's often things like how traumatized, basically that the state of Israel was created as a solution to the Holocaust. That's a narrative that I'm like, wow, that's amazing. But that is really a narrative that happens very quickly and automatically inside of US context, which is where I'm listening to people. That it gets quickly racialized, right? That it gets very quickly racialized along like who's white and who are people of color. And then inside, the US has such a strong narrative of who terrorists are. Right, so those things come very quickly. Very rarely do I find, again, and this is just folks who aren't soaked in this history, very rarely is there knowledge about kind of the multi-generational experience of Palestinians. So I think that's why I'm putting it out there. Trauma gets attached more quickly to Israeli experiences or Jewish experiences than Palestinian experiences. Again, this is like word on the street, and folks where this isn't what they're paying attention to all the time. Mm-hmm. So Omar, anything else you want to add here or just kind of work with?
I think that one of the things that has made it hard for Palestinians is that it's been difficult for us in a range of contexts to get our story told. And so if you think about one really important context in the United States on Capitol Hill, Mira and I are in Northern Virginia right now for some meetings in Washington. There's proximity to that hallowed space, not hallowed at all. Hollowed may be the better word.
The word, yeah.
There's one Palestinian American member of Congress, and Rashida Tlaib, and she's our first one in all these years. There have been some other Arab Americans through the years, and Palestinians have struggled to both have representation and to have influence otherwise. We haven't been successful in channel and using collective means to bolster our influence. And so as a result, it's striking that our one congresswoman from a Palestinian family gets censured for speaking, literally censured. A motion of censure passes against her for telling the Palestinian story, for speaking about a regime of apartheid and explaining why the label of apartheid is an appropriate label for describing what Palestinians living in different ways under Israeli rule in Israel-Palestine experience. And so that's just one example of one context, but it's a really consequential one where the lack of representation, lack of influence otherwise, together mean that this story doesn't get heard or told as much. But I think there's a flip side, which is that happily Americans are very familiar with the history of Europe in the first half of the 20th century. There's good Holocaust education. And although, I've come to learn that there are more Jews from Arab countries living in Israel today than Ashkenazi Jews, I think many Americans may identify Israel with Europe and may think of Jews as being part of the same tradition, the Judeo-Christian tradition, as it's called. Muslims would like it to be revised to be called the Abrahamic tradition.
Yeah.
By the way, Jews hate that term too.
Yeah, Christian. Oh, is that right?
Supersessionist elements there, and we don't want it.
Oh, that's right.
We're united in that.
It's the opposite of "you will not replace us." It's right, absolutely. And so I think that many Americans, when they see an interview between Dana Bash and a CNN reporter and the family of an Israeli hostage, they see someone whom they feel that they can relate to, and that is in part because of both their lack of access to the Palestinian story and their better access to having heard about Israel and having heard about Jewish history.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's so much more to say there, but I'm just watching our time, and there's another idea I want to bring into this space and hear from you all. So, listening to you all, like, you're smiling a lot, your mood is good. You also, you can tell you have a very good relationship. And I'm like, why are you guys so happy right now? It's horrible what's happening, right? And I mostly just want to say that because there's ease between the two of you. Yeah. And obviously you have differences. So what do I want to ask you? Maybe you can help me, but I really want to ask you both about how you both personally learn to hold complexity and how you hold complexity in your relationship, because you don't agree about everything. Yeah. So, and I feel like this experience, this genocide, this explosion that's happening right now is so profoundly polarizing. Literally, people I know can hardly tolerate talking to each other if they do not agree, if they're not pro-Palestinian, anti-Zionist, or pro-Israel. Those are the only options. And there's just a lot of pain and polarization. So how are you two holding complexity with you? And how are you holding complexity in your relationship? We have some music joining us.
Nice. It's a good moment it's a good theme, conceptual theme for that soundtrack. I think it's like, to use a tired metaphor, but since we're talking somatically, I think it is like a muscle. Yeah. And the more, actually, it's like biceps. Yep. Biceps are, from what gym dudes tell me, are the show muscle. They're not particularly useful, but people think they should have them to show off. So two things. The more, I'll speak for myself, the more I engage with complexity, the more, and the easier it is to keep at it. And I can give an example of what complexity is, because it's a bit of a buzzword, but I'll say the thing about the show muscle is that the more I do complexity, or practice it, maybe is a good verb, the more I'm rewarded for it by others who also want to do it and are having trouble. And so a student who comes to me in office hours asking how she can better talk to her family about these issues, she is approaching me because she has seen me do that. And so then I get rewarded for it. So then so that's like the show muscle aspect. And then I keep wanting to work at it. And I feel like I'm helping others. Now, there are many, many people who don't like my complexity at all, and who do everything they can to try to shut me down. And by calling me names, like I've been called a Jew, I've been called a self-loathing Jew, self-hating Jew, of course, and some other thing, a Jew in name only or something, some very hateful acronym. And I've also been cut off by some extended family members, like my aunt and uncle, who are Israeli and who I grew up visiting when I was a young kid, and when spending a lot of time with them in my 20s in Israel. When I was a teen, they would send me Israeli cassettes. These are still Israeli folk rock artists I still listen to and love, and they won't talk to me anymore. And that was before October 7th. That was about a year and a half ago that they fully cut off contact. So not everyone around me wants complexity, but I do think I ultimately really learned it originally from my father, who is a psychoanalytically trained psychiatrist. So he's a psychoanalytically informed psychotherapist, and complexity is the name of his game, and it's really helped me, I think, really hold it and avoid dualisms, even though I do tend to be a little bit binary in my personality. So I work against those binaries.
Thanks, Dad.
So I might speak to two distinct questions that you raised. I think the first, in a way, is about compartmentalization, and I think we do a lot of talks together around the country, especially on college campuses, and we're very often asked what keeps us up at night, and have to come to terms with the fact that both of us do suffer insomnia, do wake up and have a hard time not being in our Twitter feed, or worse, not imagining what people are experiencing and contrasting it with the relative safety that we enjoy, and the privilege that created that, but also the accident of privilege. In both of our cases, things could have gone radically different if Mira's family had stayed in Ukraine. Things could have gone radically different if my family went south toward Gaza instead of north toward Lebanon. And so we are sometimes tortured and tormented by what we see people we love in the place that we love experiencing. And maybe we'll have occasion to talk about some of their stories a little bit later. But I also know from having lived there that, and having lived there during the second Intifada in 2000, and in September of 2000, an uprising erupted in the West Bank and Gaza Strip and was very ferociously put down by the Israeli army. And I lived there during that time. And one of the things that was always striking to me, but which feels like not a bad metaphor for what we do emotionally, was how, there could literally be a gunfight a block away. A gunfight. I mean, I remember seeing those like laser guide, sights from my friend Andrew's apartment just down the street, and be sitting there and eating a pizza. And both things can happen at once. And it seems strange and wrong that both things can happen at once. And yet it's also necessary, I think, for human beings to be able to do that, because we have to stay alive. And so I think emotionally we're doing that a fair bit. And it's a way for me of staying sane, to find pleasure and joy even in the middle of this horror, and even though it feels like a source of guilt as well. So I'd say that. In terms of the way in which we engage with each other, I think it's valuable that our friendship began before October 7th. We had a lot of time before then to talk about hard things. And, I think we pretty quickly realized that even though our backgrounds and our experiences are different, even though our attachments are different, that we come at the issues in Israel-Palestine and come at how we engage with people in our lives in very similar, if not the same ways. And that's in part temperamental, and it's in part an issue of values. And so we don't have to negotiate a disagreement about whether equality needs to be a guiding principle in Israel-Palestine. And we don't have to struggle with whether mutual self-determination should be, or mutual respect, or freedom, or dignity. These are abstract principles, but they're really important as a starting point. So I think that when we struggle, and we do, I mean, we've had a lot of fights lately, and we realize that we have seen some of the news that's come out, and some of the ways in which stories have been addressed through different lenses, and we've struggled with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that what's made it easier is that commitment to the same values, the trust that we developed before, and then last, and I'll end on this point, is that we keep coming back and trying, that we have enough faith that we will get to the right place, that we don't give up. And I'll be honest that there is a real way in which our ability to keep coming back at this itself keeps me from despairing. And that our processing things together, we don't always reach an understanding, but the process of it is literally therapeutic to me. And so hard as it is, it's valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. You know, I appreciate both the, in some ways, I feel like all of us have to have a bigger reason to hold complexity, because it's inherently really uncomfortable, right? It's inherently uncomfortable. And I appreciate your metaphor about it being a muscle. I often think of complexity. How do I get wider and more spacious and wider and not react to the emotions, sensations, or thoughts that feel so intolerable? You know, I'm not going to repress them, but I also don't know, I can make more space for them. And I feel like there's so many places. Obviously, Israel and Palestine is so central. And I think about January 6th in the US. I think about like the level of gasoline that Trump and his threw on the white supremacy in the US and the anti-Black racism and what we're doing. Like, there is a lot of complexity to hold and work through within the history of this country and, you know, the colonizing roots of this country. We have a couple of people who want to come on and join the conversation, so which will be awesome. So Omar, are you going to help us do that? Okay, good. We see you. Awesome.
Oops. Okay, so first of all, get my own audio set up. So we have two very interesting people that want to join us. Two people. So first, I'll introduce Basil, who is a Palestinian who lived in Israel for a very long time. So he's his family was originally from the occupied territories, and he currently lives in LA, and he's a brilliant guy. Also, like, put together a really interesting group of friends, which I joined, that started a Burning Man camp with very interesting intention of bringing these conversations together. I don't know if him and I didn't really discuss this, but maybe we agree or disagree. But like, we realized that after October 7th, kind of like the communications within the Burning Man camp kind of fell apart. So we were just kind of like maturing in what is happening and what is not. So I'll bring this to the stage, but I also want to introduce Jonas, who I think you guys met briefly on our prep call. Jonas is someone who I wouldn't say knew from before, but we only got to know each other recently after I posted some things on Facebook which he didn't like, and he was vulnerable and brave enough to tell me that, and we had a conversation about othering. Of course, then I went on his profile and realized that he's posting I don't like. But we decided that we're gonna sit and talk about it, and him and I have been having really interesting conversations where we both tell each other things that neither of us likes, and I think it's kind of very refreshing to have him here. So, and Jonas is his parents are part of the Jewish diaspora. I think he grew up in America, but I'll let both of them actually introduce themselves.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. You guys hear me
so
well?
Why don't you guys introduce yourselves? I think.
Awesome. First of all, thank you, Omar.
I can't hear them yet.
Yeah, me neither.
Hold on, we can't hear you yet.
We can hear him.
Me?
We can.
We can.
Sound check.
Basil, there. So Jonas, no, you're both unmuted. That's weird.
Yeah. I can talk nonstop until you guys can tell me to stop.
Can't hear you.
Are you on mute?
We can hear you.
Great.
Are we
We're
good?
on. We're good. Thank you for your
you
patience.
can hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. So first of all, thank you, Omar, so much for putting this together. And Stacy, Omar, Mira, thank you, guys, for very amazing insights. And for me, it's always interesting to hear other people's perspective. My story is also kind of like very mixed. So maybe I will present that and you guys can ask also, because it's like very interwoven, a lot of different layers. So I hold the Israeli passport, right? So this is where I was born. So, the Israelis call me Arab Israeli. This is the term that I went with for many years. And I went actually, I grew up in a Arab city or town. It's like in an area called the Triangle, Mishulash. If Amira speaks Hebrew, I guess maybe she can get some of the terms. But basically, we grew up in a place where, we are Palestinians. As kids, we used to go to the villages where the army has destroyed, and our grandfathers were basically displaced from and kicked from. We actually used to visit until 2003 or 4. I think it was basically forbidden to cross to this land. It's basically now designated for future Israeli construction or whatever moshav they're building there. And so this is basically what we grew up with. But then on the other hand, the whole curriculum of the Israeli system is basically, you never actually talk about the Nakba. You never actually talk about the catastrophe. You only kind of like, yeah, there was a war, there was an Arab uprising, but like there's always a need for the Jewish power to rise, hatkuma, the power to bring together the Jewish story and create this self-determination. And for me, I've always observed that, and it was even more interesting because up to my elementary school and middle school, I was in my Palestinian Arab town village. It only became a town, I think, in the 90s. It was still considered a village before that. And then basically I went to a Jewish school. I went to basically a mixed school. It wasn't really mixed. They like to call it mixed. And they really liked me because I was the only Arabic speaker in the school. So the principal would always talk about the microcosmos of the Israeli society. And we have Christians and Muslims and Jews and Ethiopians, and everyone is here. But basically, it's like 70% Jewish, Ashkenazi, white people, and the rest are mixtures to basically cover the rest. I'm not saying that this is, like they do it on purpose, but it's part of what it is. And it was a very interesting experience because this was a boarding school. So for me, I was living there. I was 15, 16, 17, living there, growing up with people who became very close to me. And then, boom, we're in 12th grade. And everyone's talking about the army. And I was like, wait, what the hell is going on? And I think up to this point, it did bother me that, the way the curriculum is working. But for me, the people who are living with me, these are the people. These are, for me, what represents, this is the material I need to work with to build the future, not the things, the umbrella terms everyone is throwing around. And it's funny because, like, for Israelis, when they're in high school, they always make them go through this basically Holocaust journey, which they send them to Poland. And sometimes they make it like local. They bring all those speakers from the survivors of the Holocaust. And it's a beautiful thing. And I was part of it. And I was actually, I was happy to hear. And you would be surprised. But as a Palestinian and someone whose mother tongue is Arabic, I still found a lot of beautiful, interesting things in the Bible, because I had to study it for the national exams, and I had to read Shira Shirim or whatever it is. And, I found it interesting, and for me, it was never about the elements of what it created. It's the monster that it became later for me. So, and by the way, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit tense because I'm not used to speaking
It's great. Thank you. You're doing great.
Me and Omar met are basically in smaller circles because that's where I felt safe. So for me, it's also a big thing to speak here. So thank you for having me and giving me the stage. But back to my story. So this is basically when things started going sideways for me and a lot of the people I grew up around, because up to that point, I believed in basically, I had hope, you know, for me. I had hope because I saw the people around me, and I believed in the Israeli left. I thought like the left could change it, you know, like Rabin was doing something in the 90s, and you know, like, yeah, you could say a lot of things about it, but there was something there, and I still believe that my friends could do that. But I think around like 2 years after high school, I was still in touch with some friends, and there was basically sort of a group of alumni from my high school decided to do a letter of refusals, like basically encourage the high school student to not serve the army, right? And you know, me as a Palestinian is like, would it count if I sign? Who cares about what I think, right? Anyways, you know, we were like a bunch of alumni. Most of them were like, you know, Jewish Israelis, so they were pushing it. But at that point, like everyone from my class decided to sort of like cut me off. Like, okay, you know, he clearly doesn't understand the whole point. Like, of course, why would he? So he's opposing our ideas of self-determination. And I think my whole story around my story and everything is basically going to this point of self-determination. By the way, just to finish my personal story, so I lived, so after that point, I moved to Tel Aviv and Jaffa, and I studied in Tel Aviv University. Actually, I did have a Jewish Israeli partner for a long time. And then I decided to move to sort of like, you know what, I'm going to apply for a PhD program because that's my only way out. And, you know, I could pursue and find a dream that I've been always wanting to do, which is basically, I'm a scientist. So that's why I'm kind of like drawn into this world of maybe being around here in the Tech Valley. But that's how I ended up here, and that's how things got me to this point. But that story has always been there. And for me, like, it's the point of the self-determination. And I think what it means for Palestinians and what it means for the Jewish Israelis, that's the question. Because I think for many Palestinians, the story of like the Jewish self-determination is basically, okay, so Zionism, what is Zionism? How does that impact on others? And I think that's the only thing that the Israelis have not been having find a solution to, because for the Jewish, self-determination means security, basically living in a place where you feel secure. But how could you feel secure when, like, basically the self-definition of the whole thing is that you can't be secure because you're calling for, I don't know, an ethno-supremacy or some sort of like, you know, I want to say apartheid, but I don't know how much this circle accept this word here. But this is like, you know, at what cost? What is self-determination? And for me, October 7th also has been a very hard point in time, because the people who I grew up with, when I started posting about like, okay, guys, this is horrible what Hamas has done, but we should think about like, let's get out of this thing, like for a better future. Because, you know, if I keep talking about 67, 73, 40, we're not going to be done forever. We got to think about the children, the kids. We got to think about the future. Not just like justice, so that the people can in the future feel safe. It's not just about fixing the past. So I think that's the point that is hard for me. And since October 7th, a lot of people started questioning, like, do you think it's the time to talk about the origins of the problem? People are being kidnapped, you know, like how dare you? How come you speak like that? You're a traitor. Like, I literally got that, you know, I'm the person who is bringing people together because I want to talk, and then I'm called, you know, I'm spitting from the place that it basically, you know, gave me water, because, like, you know, I have my degree from Tel Aviv University, and basically people were calling like, we're going to report you to them, so they take your degree away. Like, people are literally threatening you just because you're trying to speak the pain of others. I'm just talking about the pain of 30,000 Gazans, you know, like, we have relatives everywhere. Like, we grew up, you were speaking of the Intifada before, but I remember as a child, we had relatives coming from the West Bank to visit, and then suddenly they disappeared. And I remember I was a kid, and I was asked my dad, like, oh, where is he? I haven't seen him for so long. And I was like, yeah, it's complicated, you know. And I remember as a child, but it took me like so many years after to look back and be like, damn, okay, now it makes sense. And when it
Are
happened,
you cool if we pause here for a minute?
Yes. I think it's
many very powerful things.
And I'll leave it at the point of the self-determination because I was circulating around that the entire time.
Exactly.
Yes, thank you so much for giving me the stage.
No, I'm so glad, and please stay here with us. But really, this point you said is like, if self-determination is a central factor, where does the consideration of the people you're displacing or the people you're building self-determination on top of, how does that get held in the vision, right? Omar, Mira, do you want to say anything, and then we'll make some more space?
Yeah,
No.
things. I think that the dilemma you were talking about at first about growing up among Jewish classmates and who are all inducted into the army by law, and you're by law exempt. But there's also so they have to do something legally that you don't have to do. But it's as you very well know, it's more complex than that because there's a whole social mobility aspect that comes with army service, and that's sort of their where they make a lot of friends and contacts and networking, and you're excluded from that. And they're going to be occupying your people if they're, depending on where they're stationed. And we hear that a lot with the bilingual. So in your case, as you said, you were the only Palestinian teen in your school, but the hand-in-hand schools, the bilingual schools, there's only half a dozen of them for those who are in our audience throughout the country. And they're wonderful places. They're half Palestinian citizens of Israel, maybe some from East Jerusalem, and half Jewish Israelis, and they learn bilingually. But in grade 12 or senior year, it's very, very painful as they start going their separate ways, and Palestinians are saying, I thought you got me, and all of a sudden you're going to be kind of you're going to be my enemy, and you're going to be treating my people like your enemy. And it's yeah, that sums it up. And then of course your point about self-determination, which Stacey echoed, I think is really key. Thank you for sharing your experience. What's your PhD in?
So I'm studying computer science. Actually, I'm a big sort of like engineering guy, and I think, you know, when I look back, it's a lot about it was probably my resort as a child because I felt like this is too messed up. And, you know, like as children, like I remember they would encourage you, like, oh, we have this program, like make connection with the Jews, you know. Sorry, like I'm not very PC because, you know, America, I don't know if I can say it like that, but, you know, as children, that's what they tell us, you know, like make connections. Like you want to go to their schools, you want them to like you because this is your only way out, you know. And for me, this is what I believed, you know. And that's the confusion of, like, on one hand, I want to integrate and I want to shine. And, you know, when I was speaking with my grandpa, and he would always say, you know, like, don't worry about anything, just worry about yourself and worry about your degree, worry about your school. This is your only way to lift us, you know, like stay away from the protest, stay away from anything that gets you in trouble. And I had friends who just got arrested just by being in the wrong place in the wrong time. I got friends who got very deep into like very dark places, and unfortunately, like, I lost them. And I had very different stories. Actually, maybe
Basil, I'm so sorry. I want to give Jonas time, and we only have 10 more minutes.
Yes, please. I'll wrap up. I'll just say one more sentence about the high school. Yeah, so I was the only one in my class, but there were like about 10 in my high school. And these people were always people who I looked up to, because when I was trying to solve my question of how to live with this, I would always look up to them. But honestly, like, looking back, they were more confused than I was. So I'll leave you with this confusion question. And yes, please, Jonas, I'm sorry for taking so much space, but I'd love to continue the discussion. Thank you, Stacey, for the reminder.
Yeah, for sure. Jonas, welcome. What would you like to share of yourself here?
Yeah, so I mean, quick background, I think, on what's relevant, and kind of going back to your earlier question to Omar and Mira about, you know, how do you hold this complexity? I think I was born into complexity in an odd way. My mother was born in Poland in 1946. Probably less than a year after the war was over. Funnily enough, born she was born in a newly Polish city. Stettin is about an hour from Berlin, and was emptied of its German residents at the end of the war. And people just kind of showed up and, got an apartment or a house, whatever they could find. And 9/10 of our family was murdered in the span of a few years. And at the same time, growing up, I became close friends with a guy whose father was German, and his father actually his grandfather was in the German army. And my mother it was never an issue having him in the house. He remarked on it. I didn't really realize how remarkable it was, just because I think Jews have we have a strong culture of understanding nuance. At the same time, my uncle refuses to. He doesn't like to. He probably won't get into a German car. He still holds more of a gripe. But point being is, I grew up with that. On my father's side, he's not Jewish. He is from Chile, and my grandparents were in politics in Chile, and my grandfather was in Congress shortly before the coup of 1973, and they were they weren't in the Socialist Party, but they were in another party that was allied with the socialists. My grandfather was arrested. My grandmother went into hiding. She was able, to escape. She got to the French embassy with 6 of her 7 children, and they left. And she was able to get some French diplomats to put pressure on Pinochet's government to release my grandfather. In the 90s, when they went back to Chile, they were involved in activism throughout that time. But in the 90s, when they went back after the dictatorship, my grandfather was back in Congress. He ended up being the equivalent of the Speaker of the House, a leadership position in Congress, and was part of the primary party and of the government that was transitioning the country away from the dictatorship constitution and government and way of doing things. And he had to collaborate with people who put him in prison and put his friends and colleagues in prison, and some of whom were never to be seen again. And he was able to accept that was what was called upon him in order to best serve his people. So that's kind of the sort of legacy and culture and values that I grew up with. When Omar and I met up the first time, we met up in a cafe, and I noticed when we're talking, some people are like turning their heads over to us, and because we're having a conversation that's spicier than most people are accustomed to having, that I'm very comfortable having. Anyways, I think there are a lot of things that were said during the time that I was listening that I take a lot of issue with. I certainly had a strong somatic response to. Certainly not time to address them all, but I think one thing I would like to point out is that most of us, with the exception of Basil here, have grown up in the West. Am I correct in that? Okay. So something that I think many people miss is that our moral code in the West, and moral codes are at least in part, their purpose is to be conducive to thriving. I mean, the whole idea of don't murder people is at least in part rooted, well, if you murder people, then other people are going to have a motivation to murder you, and then we're in this huge mess. And I think that the morality that leads to thriving in Western countries will get you killed in the Middle East. And I think that's really critical for understanding in terms of understanding people's motivations and humanizing them. I see a lot of people applying Western morality in a way that dehumanizes, whether it's Israelis or Palestinians or other people in the Middle East. And frankly, like I'm very adamant, what everybody is doing over in that region is entirely human. It might be ugly, but they're all very human, regardless of whatever ugly actions they're taking.
Jonas, I wish we had more time because, of course, I really want to hear where you and Omar disagree and what you have disagreed with here. So maybe there'll be, Omar, another opportunity. I want to, Omar and Mira, I'd like you all to start, and then if we have time, I'd love to go to the two of you again. What's a possible future that's mutually dignifying?
It's a good question and a hopeful one. And I'll let Omar start.
Okay. Both of us are very involved, as I mentioned earlier, in an organization and a movement that revolves around a vision for the future called A Land for All. And the idea that underlies it is that it's possible for Israelis and Palestinians each to have a state with a defined territory within the space that we call Israel-Palestine. And at the same time, for that unit, because Israel-Palestine is one place, to be treated like the single space that it is, so that Israeli Jews and Palestinians can live anywhere in that space that they like. Palestinian could, like me, could return, become a citizen of the state of Palestine, and a permanent resident of Israel, and live in the triangle near our friend Basil, or in Jaffa, where my family's from. Conversely, an Israeli Jew could remain a citizen of Israel and live in Hebron or in Nablus as a permanent resident of Palestine. I think that kind of framework strikes the right balance between the needs and aspirations of both peoples, and it's based on a recognition that while hopefully one day we'll move to a place where our identity, the complexity of our identities, can be appreciated by everyone, that we're not quite at a post-national moment yet. And so there's work to do in building and balancing. Do you want to add?
Yeah. So did you mention settlers as well?
I did.
Refugees. Yeah. So I think I came to appreciate this movement, this solution, sometimes known as a confederal approach, and the group that we're involved in is called A Land for All. So we encourage the audience, those who are tuning in now or later, to check it out. Check out
Google
the website.
Yes.
A Land for All. And I think it really squares the circle with all the concerns I'd had over the years with this or that. And it took me a while to get there. First, I was a diehard conventional two-stater. Then I went to one state for a while, one democratic state, of course, is what I mean. And then I've moved to this because I think it does connect to the needs and identities of both sides, whereas the regular two-state solution told settlers they're going to have to leave and told Palestinian refugees to just suck it up and resettle where they are. This really connects to all identities and interests in a way that I think is really quite special. So now we just have to get there.
Well, this is the next question I have for you in our 30 seconds each, which is, we're at this incredibly painful time. We're about to hit 30,000 deaths. And what do we do? What do we do? I know we're all sitting in different locations, although it seems like we're all in the United States right now. But what would you suggest people do?
Well, I just want to start where you sort of, to something you spoke about earlier. This war could not continue without the United States assistance. And Americans are better situated to change the course of this than many Palestinians and Israelis are. And Americans can push, can make their voices heard to representatives and to President Biden, and demand an end to this. And an end to a ceasefire does not mean that Israel is giving up security, but it does mean that we can begin building the kind of future that Mira and I were talking about.
Thank you. Mira, do you want to add anything?
I would add return of the hostages, release of Palestinian prisoners, a ceasefire, stop the violence.
Just so you know, every week I call the White House opinion line every single week.
That's great.
And I go, ceasefire, stop. This is insanity. And then I'm letting President Biden know how mad I am and that I might not vote for him at all. So use the White House opinion line. It's one way to get in and be direct.
Mm-hmm.
My friends, there is so much more to say. Omar, are you going to come over here and say goodbye to all of us? Yes. I have to end by 8 or else I would keep going. Come here, my friends.
How are you feeling after this marathon?
Which you?
You, Stacy.
Me. Come here. Where are you sitting down? Rotating. Okay. I feel so many things. Truthfully, I feel enlivened. I feel enraged. I feel deeply sad. I feel like I want to keep talking. Stay up another 3 hours or another 5 days. And grateful.
I feel excited and tired. I feel like we covered a lot of things, and I just have like the weight of the world, but also at the same time, I have hope that I feel less alone. And I just want to check in with Basil and Jonas before we close, because they didn't get a chance to give their vision. But just like how are you guys feeling having shared this improv? You're our improv guest. I'm very curious to see, where does today leave you guys?
I've got this inspirational music going on that's
makes everything sound better.
Okay. Well, more disagreement came up in those last comments. I do think land for all. I think it's a beautiful vision. I appreciate the creativity of it. I think there's a lot more conversation to have about that would take time. I'll just say that. And I think there's and a lot of around the world, and especially in Western society, there's impatience for social change. And I think that trying to force things can actually lead to a lot of bloodshed, to be frank. So I think it's a beautiful thing to aspire to, and I'm very happy to collaborate with people who have that vision. And
Jonas, how are you emotionally? How are you? Your internal state?
My internal state is, there's certainly some frustration. There's a fair amount of frustration. Because it's like we really just like peeked the lid a little bit. And I'm eager. I'm very hungry to go deeper, and to challenge.
Basil, how are you?
I'm good. I think one of the Omar spoke of Burning Man, and we have this 10 principles thing, right? Like, and one of those is immediacy. So for me, like jumping into this show, speaking with Omar and getting the stage, I was like, this guy's crazy. What if I say something like, but I love Omar and I love this, and I'm so happy because like just listening to you guys for the past 3 hours, it's been just amazing. Actually, I was coming by a neighbor and I was like, check this out. And he's like, wow, and he was sitting here. So thank you. And I'm really happy I jumped. So immediacy, yes, adopt that. It's a good thing, because if you overthink, you're not going to do it. So thank you for giving the stage. How I feel about the future, I think no matter what's going to happen, I just think that we should just keep in mind the horizon and not just the short-term future. So I loved what Jonas said about the impatience of social change. It is true, but also what is happening. I think checking in with the world, or not just the world, but the impacted parties within the whole struggle from all the sides. Because it's not just about the people who were, but who are. And I think this is what we're doing. So thank you guys for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you for jumping in, and just thank you all for going into something that is probably uncomfortable, and hopefully that creates a new kind of conversation. And I resonate with Jonas. I'd love to see more of that. Jonas and I have been trying to figure out how we can bring some of these spicy conversations, as he said, to how do we engage more people in them. And there's something about not rushing into it, which I think we both agree on, and the danger in that. But thank you all for staying up. And Omar and Mira, I know you guys just came from another talk, so you guys have been technically speaking for 4 hours now. So I hope you guys have some rest today. And hopefully this is the start of many more conversations.
Thank you for organizing this and bringing us together.
How about we close the same way sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you so much to Stacy for moderating with giving such meaty questions and starting with centering us, which was such a great way to begin.
Welcome. Happy to be with you all. Happy to know you now.
Likewise. Thank you for creating the space to both of you. And good to meet Basil and Jonas.
Thank you.
Thanks, Yashakich.
Thank you, Dajani. How about feeling called to close the same way we started with the song about joy that you shared with me?
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it if you missed it in the first place, but I think it's the perfect way to close. Have a good night, and thank you all for everyone that was joining us on the streams. I hope you enjoyed this. And
good night, guys.
Let us know how you felt it.
Good night.
Good night.
This joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Oh, this joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Don't you know that this joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Oh, I said the world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. Oh, this strength that I have, this strength that I have, this strength that I have. Oh, yeah, now. The world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it to me. This strength that I have. Oh, yeah, the world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it to me. This strength that I have. Oh, yeah, the world didn't give it to me. Oh, I said the world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. Oh, this love that I have, this love that I have. Oh, yeah, now. The world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it to me. This love that I have. Oh, yeah, the world didn't give it to me. Don't you know that this love that I have, yeah, the world didn't give it to me. Singing, the world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. Oh, this pride that I have, this pride that I have, this pride that I have. Oh, yeah, now. The world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it to me. This pride that I have. I said the world didn't give it to me. Don't you know that this pride that I have, yeah, the world didn't give it to me. Oh, I said the world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. All this peace that I have, oh, yeah. The world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give me my peace that I have. Oh, yeah, now. The world didn't give it to me. Won't you sing about peace? This peace that I have. Oh, yeah, now. The world didn't give it to me. I said the world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. All this joy that I have, this joy that I have, this joy that I have. Oh yeah, now the world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it to me. This joy that I have. I said the world didn't give it to me. Don't you know that this joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Oh, I said the world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. The world didn't give it and the world can't take it away. The world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. The world didn't give it and the world can't take it away. The world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. The world didn't give it and the world can't take it away. The world didn't give it, the world can't take it away.
Resistance Revival Chorus believes in the words written by the poet Toy Derricott when she wrote, "Joy is an act of resistance." We believe in the words of Mr. Harry Belafonte, who said, "When the movement is strong, the music is strong." We sing to revive the hearts of those who fight for social justice, and we sing together for freedom.